Great. A very good morning to all of you. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Day 2 event titled Tamil Nadu Sustainable Energy Transformation Dialogues, also known as Tamil Nadu Valangundra Valarchi Padegal, hosted by WRA India, Auroval Consulting, and Citizen Consumer and Civic Action Group. I am Harish from WRA India's Energy Program, and I will be taking you through today's agenda. So before we begin this hybrid event, I just want to share few information and housekeeping rules. I would kindly request everyone to put their phones on silent throughout the duration of the event. Please scan the QR codes on your respective tables to access the day's agenda and our research publications. This is a hybrid event as few of our distinguished speakers would join us online. And so this session is being recorded and it will be published on WRA India's YouTube channel. And one request for the virtual participant, please keep yourself on mute when not speaking. And for any technical issues, you could reach us through chat box. So I welcome you all again today. Day one of the said dialogue facilitated various discussions on Tamil Nadu decarbonization and then financial sustainability and then integrating new technologies in this Tamil Nadu's energy transition. So in yesterday's session, there was two key points which was highlighted by Mr. Vikram Kapoor and Supriya Sahu, which I want to touch upon. So Mr. Vikram Kapoor highlighted some of the challenges of power sector in this renewable energy transition. Like one is renewable energy is in in the private sector and PPAs are signed with them, and then settling payments on time is getting a challenge, and then inadequate transmission capacity and also steep ramping up and ramping down of thermal power plant. That was a very valid point highlighted by him. And similarly, Ms. Supriya Sahu IAS has also highlighted that government has formed an SPV called TN Green Climate Company, and the aim is to bring out synergy and maximize the impact on the ground in terms of climate change and sustainability. So to begin with the first session of the day, titled Renewable Power from the Consumer Lens. With the increase in state's electricity tariff to bridge the utilities accumulated revenue gap, it is imperative to understand consumers' viewpoint in terms of challenges and opportunities of integrating distributed RE in their consumption profile. This session, this session plans to share the innovative tariff mechanisms like green tariff structure, green open access, alternate power procurement model, and consumer awareness for promoting energy efficiency and RE both at city and state levels. So I'd like to invite Mr. Toyin Van Megan to deliver the welcome remarks on the podium, please. Mr. Toyin is one of the co-founders of Auroval Consulting and is also involved in Auroval Township infrastructure development and energy planning. Previously, he held several roles and corporate leadership positions in global renewable energy sector and has extensive experience in international business. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that all the batteries have been fully recharged so that we have another good, interesting session today. So as already explained yesterday, we looked at the energy transition. We had the launching of a few nice, interesting working papers. There were interesting presentations on Tamil Nadu's future energy mix. And then I found also the interesting session on finance. It was a very interesting session on finance yesterday. In a lighter vein, you might have noticed that finance people are always very good in inventing terms which will make something which is bad look very good. And I give you two examples. There is printing of unlimited amount of currency all over the world, and they call that quantitative easing. So when you hear the word quantitative easing, you think it is very good, but actually it's of course not good at all, because the more money we print, the less the value of money. And that's one of the reasons we have such a big inflation. And then yesterday, some of you might have heard for the first time a similar term, which is called regulatory asset. So you must be thinking, oh, asset, good. But actually a regulatory asset is a liability. It is actually money that the DISCOM ought to have collected if tariffs had been increased in time, but they could not collect them, so they parked them on a balance sheet as a future receivable. And receivables on a balance sheet are assets. So finance guys are very creative in that regard. And then we had, of course, another interesting techno-commercial feasibility session to look at different technologies and how they will play out. So today it is mainly on tariff mechanisms, open access, alternate procurement models, etc. It's more consumer focused today. And we have to also remember that the ultimate stakeholders in all of what we are discussing are we, the citizens. Whether we are called consumer, prosumer, or simply citizen, it is all about us. It is our future, the future of our children, and the future of our grandchildren, and so on, that we are talking about. It's in the end not about discoms, regulators, and other institutions, it's about the people. And therefore, I would like to appeal to us that we have to take more initiatives by ourselves. As you can already see again with COP27, it is not much coming out of it as of now. And what I very often see, and what we all see with these type of big international conferences, which are all over the media, it always feels, to me at least, too little, too late. And running behind the facts and not being proactive and getting things really solved. So we have to do it ourselves. We cannot rely on big institutions and big conferences to solve it for us. When Audible Consulting was part in the drafting of some of the solar policies, solar energy policies in the country, we made sure that the consumer part of it was always well covered. We always said, look, the big guys know how to take care of themselves. Let us work for the consumer segment. And that is how, for example, you found that in the first policy of Tamil Nadu in 2013, net metering was introduced. The policy that we wrote for Pondicherry and Delhi, we included two unique features. One is called group net metering, where a consumer who has more than one connection can get the surplus of one credited in another one. And we introduced also the concept of virtual net metering, where, for example, a flat owner who doesn't have a roof of his own can be participant in a collective solar system. And suppose if you invest 1%, 1% of the energy would be credited in your bill as if you are having the panels on your own roof. That's why we call it virtual net metering. So our focus has always been to make sure that the consumer segment is well taken care of. But there were a lot of challenges. The first challenge came in 2018-19, when there was a very strong lobby and almost a fait accompli that net metering in Tamil Nadu was going to be replaced with gross metering. It was basically decided, 90% decided. TNERC was on board, Tranjetco was on board. So we, with our team of SETETN, the team that does all this work together with three of us, we got into the action. And we had fortunately a very proactive chairman at that time, Mr. Vikram Kapoor, who was here yesterday, and he allowed us to explain why we thought that that's not a very good idea. We were convinced that if gross metering would be introduced instead of net metering, it would be the end of the rooftop solar. So we had a lot of meetings, and the end result was a compromise, which is not a bad compromise, that, okay, no gross metering, but net feed-in. And the difference between net feed-in and net metering is simply that the export is not deducted from the import in kilowatt hours, but is compensated for at a particular net feed-in tariff. And later on, with the regulator, we could also get the net metering back for at least the domestic segment. So it was a big challenge, but that challenge was overcome. The next big challenge came when the Ministry of Power, Government of India, came in December 2020 with the electricity rights of consumer rules. Now, many of those rules were good. They dealt with, repairing meters on time and taking care of grievances. But there was one paragraph which was just, most people didn't even notice that paragraph. It was clause 11.4, which simply said that gross metering for all solar systems above 10 kilowatt. So again, net metering under attack. So we got in touch with, we found out who the joint secretary was who was dealing with the subject, and got in touch with that person on a very regular basis and explained also that gross metering, for example, for an institutional consumer is even physically impossible. To give you an example, you take IIT Madras or you take Anna University, they have many buildings, and if they put some on 10 or 20 of those buildings solar, under gross metering, they would have to run a cable from every solar installation to the common metering point for the gross meter to record the gross generation. So we said even technically it's not possible, and it will kill completely the rooftop solar segment. So this was the second big attack on net metering, and it had a happy ending because they then increased the 10 kilowatt threshold to 500 kilowatt. So now below 500 kilowatt net metering is allowed. Of course, whether the state gives net metering or not, that is a different story, but now at least that restriction was removed. And now we have another challenge which has come around the corner, which is network charges. So the regulator has decided that on the gross generation, so whether you export it to the grid or whether you consume it yourself, whatever you generate, you have to pay something to the TNEB for the what they call network charges. Now we have analyzed the network charges in detail, and if you take network charges as a percentage of the tariff, so there is a feed-in tariff, it comes to about between 6.7 and 28% increase in your cost. So definitely network charges is to be also taken up as an issue. We have also made a calculation that if you do not change the tariff, the net feed-in tariff, and you introduce network charges, what does it do to the return on equity? So the regulator, when they fix the tariffs, they assume a return on equity of 14%, 1/4. So we calculated what it becomes with network charges, and you get a minus 5.72% up to minus 12.29% return on equity. In other words, you are just throwing the money with network charges. So network charges is the latest challenge, and we are under the impression that not everyone yet has fully understood its impact. Not many people have made a back of the envelope calculation to find out exactly what network charges do to their return. It is a very big impact. And it is also not really acceptable from another point of view. When a tariff is fixed, a feed-in tariff, the regulator uses a calculation which is known as levelized cost of energy calculation, LCOE. And in the LCOE, you load all the costs, capital cost, finance cost, O&M, insurance, etc. But after you have fixed that tariff, you can't come a year later and introduce a new cost component. Then you have to bring that cost component also into the LCOE calculation, which would then increase the tariff. And then you might as well not have network charges, because what you take with the left hand, you have to give it back with the right hand. So network charges is a new challenge which is coming up. So in short, if we want to make sure that the consumer segment of solar remains active, we have to always be very watchful that not somewhere a little clause here or a little clause there spoils it. And that is one of the things that the three partners of the Sustainable Energy Transformation team are doing all the time. The last thing that I would like to ask today's speakers to perhaps also cover, maybe you have not planned it in your presentation. Yesterday, it was mostly about technology and finance. But I wonder whether finance and technology alone can solve these issues. We need to look also into lifestyle. Now, lifestyle is a very subjective subject. I fully understand. I mean, you can't tell your neighbor how he has to live. And the last one who can tell how you have to live is the government. But we can do it ourselves. If you take hotels like this, I don't know how all of you felt yesterday, Bharat was in short sleeves today, he has come in long sleeves for the simple reason that it was way too cold here. They said they had put a thermostat at 24. We don't believe a word of it. It felt like 18, 19, 20. Now, why is that necessary? It doesn't require. Temperature is a relative experience. If you come from outside 37 into a room of 30, you already feel better. So there are a lot of examples where we ourselves can ask, do we really need what we think we need? So the lifestyle part of the whole story also has to be brought in because I don't think that technology, policies, and um, finance alone can solve the problem. If you follow the COP27 debates and if you see the speeches that some of the government leaders have given, it's all about money. So many billions here and so many millions there. And of course, that money again is going to be printed with quantitative easing. So we are back to square one there also. But it's not only about money. We have gotten, since the Industrial Revolution, since the steam engine became mainstream in 1862, we have plugged the whole society into fossil fuels. Our whole economy runs on fossil fuels. And that has resulted in a certain lifestyle where we are used to having power for 24 hours a day. But the sun is not there for 24 hours a day. Now, I'm not saying that we should all go to bed at 6 o'clock and wake up again when the sun rises. I'm not saying that at all. But we could, all of us can look into what can we actually do ourselves about all these issues. So yesterday when I went back, I'm staying in a relative's place in Aripuram, which is Greenways Road. I decided, you know what? Instead of taking an auto right from here, let me walk up to Mount Road and catch the auto from there. Then when I was on Mount Road, I said, why not I walk up to Peters Road? So I went to Peters Road. And when I once reached Peters Road, I said, why not I walk up to Chola Hotel Woodlands, which is on the Radhakrishna Salai, those who are familiar with Chennai. And once I had reached that particular crossing, why not I walk all the way, C.P. Ramaswamy Road, and I reached the Greenways Road extension where I stayed last night in 1 hour and 15 minutes. It would have taken me half an hour probably by auto. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of you should walk back to Pondicherry, Auroville, etc. But what I am suggesting is that sometimes you can just think for a second, do I need to go in this vehicle? Can I just walk around the corner? Can I cycle to work? So all these type of little small decisions will also have a huge impact if a country with 1.3 billion people makes these type of small decisions, the impact might be much better and much higher than what 20 COP27 conferences can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toyn, for the brief introduction that touched upon day one sessions and also welcoming all our guests and participants on this special occasion today. So our next speaker would be through Simranjit Kalon IAS, Commissioner of Madurai City Corporation. He is supposed to deliver the special address today. He is a 2016 batch officer of Indian Administrative Service, Tamil Nadu State Cadre. Mr. Kalon initially started serving as Assistant Collector Viluppuram and then Assistant Secretary in MNRE and was posted as Sub-Collector in Thuthukudi, where he served from 2018 to 2021. Prior to the current posting, he was Regional Deputy Commissioner of Great Chennai Corporation from 2021. And unfortunately, he couldn't make it here today in person to deliver his special address, but he's kind enough to send his pre-recorded address for us. I would request the team to play it for us.
Good morning, everyone. I am Simranjit Singh. I am working as a Commissioner in Madurai Corporation. It's a pleasure to address this conclave, which aims to chart out the trajectory for the Tamil Nadu energy sector, which is decarbonized and is based on renewable energy. Already, Tamil Nadu is pioneer in the usage of renewable energy. We have a big percentage of power coming from wind energy as well as solar. Keeping in line with the initiatives of Tamil Nadu government in Madurai Corporation also, our main building also has a solar rooftop panels installed. It was done as early as in 2014. Keeping in line with the energy efficiency, we are moving towards more of BOE usage. With respect to collection of garbage, we are moving towards usage of electric vehicles. We have purchased around 500 battery operated vehicles. At the same time, out of 100 watts, 98 watts we have already converted to LED light, which results in energy saving, which is a crucial part in reducing the carbon footprint. So I look forward to more ideas in the conclave and also more practical solutions which can be implemented at the local level. And I congratulate and give best wishes to WRI for conducting this event. May this event be successful.
So, thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Simrajan sir, for joining us virtually, and it's a great honor to all of us. So, up next, we'll have a presentation from my colleague, Mr. Deepak Sriram Krishnan of WRA India, and Vishnu Rao from Citizen Consumer and Civic Action Group. So, firstly, I'd like to invite Deepak Sriram Krishnan, Associate Director of WRA India's Energy Program, to present on Green Power Procurement Model on the podium, please. He leads work on clean energy initiatives, mainly renewable energy and energy efficiency for different consumer categories. He also takes over clean energy transition and water energy nexus. Prior to this, he worked with energy consulting practices of PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte. Over to you.
Thank you, Harish. Good morning, everyone. So I think Tuan has laid out the agenda for today, making it more consumer focused. Unfortunately, I'll not be able to meet the lifestyle related points, but definitely there is going to be consumer focused. So given the nature of today's session, what I thought is give you an example of what a consumer oriented approach by utilities could be based on some work that we have done on the C&I consumer side. As you all know, commercial and industrial consumers, even in yesterday's presentation, we saw that they constitute about 50% of the total electricity consumption by, you take it across states at the national level, however you slice and dice, that number is close to that number is close to 50%, which is a significant chunk, and decarbonization efforts there could definitely help propel the overall clean energy conversation forward. And Tuan did mention a very important point about it needs to be all about us, but looking at as you will see from the slides, it is still not all about us. Just as an example, it is C&I consumers, and I'll also put forward the case of why it needs to be more consumer focused. So this is what I'll take you through today, a snapshot of the DISCOM C&I consumer tension. Why is it that it's significantly, it's an elephant in the room kind of thing? What's been attempted so far? Why should there be a need for a paradigm shift? And just summarize it with a specific example. So there is a significant rising ambition across C&I consumers globally, and Asia Pacific is a market which is also growing rapidly. And if you see this curve, it is pretty self-explanatory. The volumes that corporates are procuring is rising year on year across the globe, and even the smaller companies are joining along in the bandwagon, the MSMEs, etc. And we will see some of that going forward. But this is a growing market, and they enter into contracts on their own, or they get procure it through their utility. All those options are available to the consumers, and they are making use of it. There are some external drivers, as I mentioned. One is regulation. We have our own renewable purchase obligations, which of course is there for the DISCOM, as yesterday we heard Mr. Kapoor speak about. But at the same time, even if you are a consumer who has entered into open access through thermal energy, you will need to also meet those RPO obligations. But the fact remains that people are looking for more renewable energy based open access agreements also. If you take a look at the international markets, you'll find that, for instance, EU has brought in this cross-border carbon tax, which means that any exports coming from other countries, which is a significant component of our MSMEs revenue, they will also need to start adopting clean energy initiatives. Similarly, large corporates, even within their supply chain, are bringing in a number of targets that the MSMEs need to meet by so and so. Here, just showing you a snapshot of what Apple has done, how their journey has evolved over the last 5 years, and the graph below, you can see what is the volume of clean energy that their supplier MSMEs have adopted on their own, as well as supported by Apple's own initiatives and installations, and also utilities in the different local markets have also provided products for these companies to adopt. Okay, so the challenge now is that in India, as we all know, the C&I consumers cross-subsidize tariffs to a significant extent, and with their open access installations, growing year on year, and you can see the volumes that have grown. Again, the challenge for the utility is how do they compensate for that revenue that they will lose out with these consumers migrating away from the grid. So this is the major source of the tension between utilities and the C&I consumers, and we are all aware about this. So, yeah, and why do these consumers move away? And the cross subsidy that I mentioned earlier is a significant part. As you can see from these graphs, if you see the grid tariff across states, and it's only exceptions like Gujarat, again, reasons could be multiple as to why it is so low in those particular states versus other states, why it is so high. If you compare it with the landed cost of solar, I think that's the technology which has been considered in this. If you see the landed costs versus the grid tariffs, you can clearly see the cost economics that as a C&I consumer one would look at in order to migrate away from the grid. And utilities have also made significant attempts to stem this flow. And Tuan spoke about the net metering restrictions that were imposed. How the attempts to move it from 10, but it's only gone up to 500. It hasn't become a blanket exemption. The other way to stop this exodus, and looking at it from a utilities perspective, is imposing of additional surcharge under the argument that a lot of pre-contracted power plants are going to be remaining idle because of this open access. So these additional surcharges have also been a definite bone of contention between utilities, consumers, and the regulators. And but at the same time, they have been allowed, and they get added on to your transactions, with the hope that these would deter companies from moving away. Now, in my view, it is temporary, but unfortunately, we don't see the utilities, recognizing this fact. We still hear the argument that what is it? I can put in more charges and prevent people from moving away, which is fine as on today. But tomorrow, thinking of tomorrow, if there is significant cost fall in cost of batteries, what is to prevent, say, a consumer from completely reducing the dependence from the grid and moving away into a battery renewable based situation, and maybe coming back in the odd 1 or 2 hours that they may need some emergency support back to the grid. That threat and possibility is always there, which unfortunately we don't see a recognition of. Next slide. Yeah, and at the same time, the voice of the consumer has slowly but very, very faintly being started to heard. And this is green tariffs is one of the examples that we are seeing. So Karnataka had introduced this way back in 2010, 2011. And at that time, the regulators, proposition was fine. You are a corporate, you are paying so and so tariff, but if you have to demonstrate your green credentials, pay extra and demonstrate. That was the logic behind which they had introduced this tariff, which, at the in the early days when typically green energy was expensive, it still made sense. People were able to buy that argument, and there was initial acceptance of this tariff. But again, in our analysis, we have found that there was only one consumer, Mangalore Chemicals and Fertilizers, which adopted this, and even their volume started to slowly go down over the years. But as we have started seeing reducing costs of RE, the companies themselves have started to ask, why is it that I should go through you and pay more than what you're already taking from me? And but nevertheless, different states have gone ahead, and last 2-3 years have seen a sudden flow of, it's almost like you have waited for one bus for 1 hour, but in the next 2 minutes you see 5 buses coming along. So you have seen Maharashtra introduce, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, and in this tariff order yesterday, TN2 has introduced a premium with a premium of 10%. Of course, the fine print is that TN, the original premium was 50%, which they then brought down to 10%. The premium in Maharashtra is 66 paise, but the commission themselves had determined that the premium should be 1 rupee 30 paise, but with 1 rupee 30 paise, nobody would even look at this. Therefore, they brought it down to 66 paise. So right now, this is the only kind of simplistic premium-based utility offered renewable energy product. It's almost like Vodafone coming to you and saying that you're on this 299 plan. I'll give you a slightly better plan, which makes you claim some credit, but you need to pay 499 without any tangible benefits that I can see for myself. So that is the kind of product which is on offer, and clearly, apart from the initial exuberant adoption of this, we don't see many people, coming into this. So to test this hypothesis, what we did was sorry, I'm going to the results. One back. Yeah. So we conducted a survey across these 5 states covering about 2,700 consumers, and we had 4 categories of this. So one was on the SME segment, people who had adopted renewable energy. People in the SME segment who had not adopted renewable energy. Now this could either be people who are not aware of the benefits, there still are some of them, or there are people who have gone through the route, they've got frustrated with the process and they have said, it's not for me, I'll just stick to what I know. Similarly, on the corporate side also, there are people who have not adopted. So we had a mix of these populations. Now, if you see the graph on the lower left, you'll find that among corporate RE users, people who are unaware of green tariffs is a lesser proportion versus the other 3 categories. So even among SME renewable energy users, the awareness levels are low. Corporate non-RE users and SME non-RE users, the proportion is relatively higher. So fundamentally, as a product which is being offered for consumers to take up, if this is the level of non-awareness, that itself is a big question mark. And it's not just in the C&I side. Similarly, we had done a primary survey for residential rooftop solar across 5 cities. This was the story. The awareness levels are very low because people believe, governments, utilities believe that if there is a website and a page and I have created that, that's enough. Everybody will keep going to that website. It is almost like another Facebook had been created, which is not the case. You need to push these through traditional media like newspaper, radio, which hopefully now will pick up. But again, the dependence on portals and apps was one of the major reasons that we found. And over here, especially in the C&I segment, even if, for example, even in a state like Maharashtra with 3 private utilities in Mumbai, though this premium had been announced, none of the utilities have a web page saying, how do you go about it? There is some general email ID saying, write to us, we'll talk to you. It's almost like these are one-on-one negotiations which, are there. So that kind of awareness is, something that needs to be improved. If even at least this very basic product needs to be pushed through. Of course, there are some who have heard about green tariffs, but they want to see a proof of concept, how it would work with whether the utility would transfer all the RECs to them, how would those RECs be treated, would they be retired? So those kinds of questions also remain. So right now it's just an announcement and a few media coverages, few tweets talking about this state introduced green tariffs, but that next step of actively working with the consumer to make that work, that's something we have not seen. And that kind of is summarized here. So as I spoke earlier, the awareness levels are low, and the 60, not surprisingly, 60 to 80% of them found it uneconomical. But however, on the other side, MSMEs felt that given, and this was before this new 100 kilowatt green open access rules had come out, and at that time, when we did the survey, it was still in the 1 megawatt form. The question was fine. We are not able to access any of the other opportunities to go green. So if we anyway have to compete in export markets where having green energy is a must, yeah, fine. If this is the only opportunity for me, we will take it. So that was a clear messaging that came out. And so most of them felt that rooftop solar systems promise better returns, and this last point about 11 to 26% of them finding it acceptable was predominantly MSME. So that clearly is something that utilities need to target. And I think what we have also not seen is that whenever tariffs are being determined, there is, yes, of course, there is a process where a petition is submitted, hearings are held, and an order is brought out. But consumer surveys looking at what people want, that kind of outreach by the utility in trying to design something which is friendly for consumers is totally missing. It's almost like we are sitting in a room saying that this might work, let's put it out in the tariff order, and but that's not how a consumer focused organization has to perform. So maybe instead of calling it electricity or energy sector, maybe if we categorize it under a consumer retail goods or something, that's where they talk to consumers more. Would that help? I don't know. But so in terms of the last point I just wanted to make about the fresh thinking that is needed, companies have drawn up this corporate renewable energy buyer principles, and this, of course, it's a US focused initiative, but a lot of points mentioned there does have applicability here. So one is having greater choice in procuring renewable energy, working with the utilities and regulators. So of course, there is also the fact here that you can't design a product and do exclusive power procurement only for one particular category. So with those constraints, how do utilities, regulators, and this is as I mentioned earlier, it's an example. C&I consumers are used as an example here. Same way utilities can also engage with residential consumers. With Kusum rollout, farmers being, so you need to work with the consumer and design something that is a win-win for all of them. And the key point is that everybody is looking for access to long-term fixed price renewable energy. We have also seen the impact of fossil fuel pricing and how it has significantly been volatile and hit the wallets of consumers. So with this, I'll close my presentation with the message that the utilities, regulators need to work with all categories of consumers to design products that they need, and that may see more uptake of clean energy. Thank you.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Deepak, for the insightful session on the renewable energy power procurement through green tariffs. So on the first session, we would like to move on to the next presenter, Mr. Vishnu Rao, Senior Researcher from Citizen Consumer and Civic Action Group, to present on collective prosumerism. On the podium, please. He has over 20 years of experience with his area of expertise on electricity, renewable energy, water supply and services, integrated water resources management, climate change, competitive law and economics, environmental impact assessment process. Over to you.
So this is a thinking in progress for the past 1 year actually, because when Mr. Tuan came to CAG in Orville, and the idea was that prosumers are finding it difficult to install rooftop solar, the role of network charges, a lot of things were kind of taken up during those meetings. But the idea then was, what are the prosumers doing about it? Was something that I kind of thought about, and I was thinking, what will happen if we form a prosumer collective? Can it be attempted? So then the question is, will a collective for residential rooftop solar prosumers be possible in Tamil Nadu? I don't know whether it's a wishful thinking or whether that such a collective can operate and take up the network charges issues that's being spoken about quite vociferously. So, so oh, that one. Okay, next one. Yeah. So forming a collective will take some time. Yeah, no, that is one thing. Okay, I think everyone knows what a prosumer is, but interestingly enough, a prosumer doesn't know what a prosumer is. He still calls himself as a consumer who has installed rooftop solar. That's the definition he gives everybody, rather than calling himself as a prosumer. I think popularizing that word itself will make a lot of sense, I suppose. And we were very surprised by that lack of knowledge about the subject matter. So, of course, everyone knows a prosumer means a person who consumes electricity from the grid and also injects electricity in the grid for distribution licensee from this using the same point of supply. It's a very administrative definition given, but I've tried to unpack it by looking at the EU directives and all that. So prosumerism is what they talk about, the very fact that you are a prosumer and you have certain rights and responsibilities in the power sector, and they are called as active energy citizens. I think that's very key there, because the term citizenship is kind of uh, denoted to attached to energy, probably to water. I don't know, certain aspects, but here the prosumerism means an active energy citizen who are who are producing, self-consuming, or storing energy, and or participating in the energy market by selling or sharing their energy, either individually or collectively, for example, as part of an energy community. I think this definition basically shows there are no barriers to exit or entry. It's a kind of a perfect competition kind of an example, where you can sell, you can withdraw, you can do whatever you want. But unfortunately, it's not so. There are barriers to promotion of rooftop solar. The utility debt spiral. If all of us become prosumers, how does the utility gain money? The affordability question of solar, rooftop solar. There's a lack of information and data, and ability to easily interact with others. That's not there, because, and there's a lack of collective commitment to being, to be seen as an energy community, to come together. I think last point is very important, because the social cohesion that we all get, maybe if it is through religion or through a political party, we all think we are socially, there's a social, kind of a togetherness that we feel. That social cohesion is something that we need to probably think about and work towards. And so in this context, we thought, let's come together, let's bring some prosumers together, and that's the difficult part. Bringing prosumers together is one of the most difficult things we have done in CAG. So I think what have then we figured out, let's put a rationale behind what we want to do with this gathering. Um, we wanted to find out if they get a feel of they're willing to collaborate, cooperate as a collective, probably as a loose informal coalition to promote social cohesion, for advocating for rooftop solar, to enable residential prosumers to participate in the electricity governance process, um, to act as a collective and negotiate with other stakeholders on an equal footing, to understand how open residential prosumers will be to taking up specific issues. So we had our first meeting on 3rd September. We tried to, we had around 30 to 40 prosumers. So it was a very education. From this, what are the lessons we learned? Next slide, I think. So what happened was we took up specific issues. We presented to the TEDA and TANGETCO. We also thought let's have a WhatsApp forum as usual, figure out what exactly they'll be talking about. Again, we figured out that these are all good attempts to make to keep them engaged in some manner, but what more can be done? Next. So what are the lessons we learned? We learned there's definitely an interest, but needs constant engagement. Residential prosumers, unlike commercial and industrial prosumers, are fragmented and dispersed. I don't think we know the next in our neighborhood how many have set up rooftop solar. We can't even talk to them. Identification of residential prosumers is a problem. Motivating them to be part of an initiative would possibly require incentives such as CAG acting as a consumer desk to redress their grievances. CAG has already, during the meeting, there are a couple of problems that kind of came up with regard to bidirectional meter, the reading of it, regard to subsidies, with regard to developers not being, fly-by-night developers. So those kind of issues, but we tried to resolve a couple of them. That is the utility. So initial barriers that you are facing right now is two ways. One is you don't have a database. There's no database available. And another thing is that installations are made by different developers. We don't have a kind of a identification problem there to bring them together. I can't say tomorrow I'm getting like, tomorrow I cannot say I got 10 to 15 on hand. It's not possible. Lack of communication. Prosumers don't communicate with each other. That's the thing. So that becomes an interest barrier. There's a lack of interest in the whole subject because anyway, everybody is altruistic. You kind of are thinking about yourself all the time. And coordination issues to form collectives and association. There's a huge transaction cost here. Next. So being ambitious, so we thought we'll expand it a little bit more. We wanted to have a database of 1,500 residential prosumers. Sign up around 1,000 prosumers to this to our initiative, to the forum. An active web page to see if we can gather more strength. Prosumers meetings will be held up in the signed up areas. A state level meeting is planned next year to bring in. So I think two things. One is I gave you what we learned, and for the panel also to kind of tell us if this is a good effort or not. Thanks.
Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you so much, Vishnu and Deepak, for a very enriching morning session. We will now break for 10 to 15 minutes for a cup of tea or coffee. Please grab your cup and make yourself comfortable. We will begin our next session in 15 minutes. Thank you. Requesting everyone to please take their seats and we'll be commencing in next 5 minutes. Requesting everyone to please take their seats. We'll be beginning now. Yes, thanks. Yeah, so welcome back after your tea break. Hope you all had a refreshing break. We would now be beginning our last session of the day. So it's basically a panel session on the theme titled Renewable Power from the Consumer Lens. So I would like to invite the distinguished speakers and guests for the panel discussion on the stage as I call upon their names and introduce them. First, I would like to call upon Mr. G. Sundarrajan of Poolagin Nanbargal on the dais, please. Mr. G. Sundarrajan is largely known for his environmental activism through Poolagin Nanbargal, for which he is a volunteer coordinator. Sundarrajan has been part of many environmental struggles across Tamil Nadu, activist of Poolagin Nanbargal, uh, making it people centric. Today, actively campaigning on climate change issues and creating awareness amongst people from different walks on mitigation, adaptation, and building resilience in Tamil Nadu. Sundarajan has written 3 books in Tamil on environmental issues in the state. Currently, he is also member of Tamil Nadu Governing Council on Climate Change. Secondly, I would like to welcome Mr. S. Venkatachalam, Chairman MCCI Energy Committee on the dais, please. Mr. S. Venkatachalam Seshaiyer is the managing director of a company since 23rd September 2013. He has over 33 years of experience in the areas of manufacturing, business development, marketing, and profit center management. He has significant experience in the areas relating to plastics, packing, and wind energy companies like Tata Steel, ITC, Signode, Syntex, and RRB Energy. Next, I'd like to welcome Ms. Vinita Gopal, co-founder and CEO of Azar Social Impact Limited. She excels at developing strategy, planning commissions, and building collaborative platforms for change. Vinita has campaigned on a range of environmental and social justice issues in India for over 20 years. She led several successful campaigns on climate change, pollution at Greenpeace India, where she also served as interim executive director and program director. She has supported Dastakar Andhra in its work with handloom viewers. Next, I would like to welcome Mr. S. Sampath, President of Maditsia Association, who has joined us virtually today. Mr. S. Sampath is the President of Maditsia Association. Maditsia elaborates Madurai District Tiny and Small Scale Industries Association. It is mainly for micro and small industries, which is having around 1,500 members from the Madurai district, having manufacturing and services sector, comprising various segments like automobile, textiles, rubber, food processing, etc. And finally, I would welcome Ms. Priyanka Tirumurthy, Regional Engagement Associate from Climate Trends, who will be the moderator of this session. She has started her career as a journalist at Times Now in Mumbai and has a reporter and producer who handled large breaking news stories and several news shadows, including the News Hour. Having worked extensively on human rights and gender discrimination, the effect of climate change on already existing gaps and problems made her a pivot communication where she could help draw these lines for other members of media and for policy and decision makers. Apologies, I would also like to invite another speaker, Mr. Martin Scheffler, co-founder of Oroville Consulting, on the dais, please. Over to you, Priyanka.
a subsidy, but there is absolutely no communication effort to spread awareness about these opportunities.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own journey as a solar producer or a prosumer, in that I've been working on climate change for a very long time, and it felt the only right thing when we were asking everybody to go renewable that I should also try and do it myself. And so about in 2006, I decided that I would put solar rooftop in my house in Bangalore. And it's very similar, like you don't know who to approach. I looked up websites and tried to contact people, and there wasn't much interest to come to somebody's house to set up a really small solar system at that time. Then finally, one of my friends happened to be also interested in a solar business, so I got him to install a solar setup on my roof. But I did not go down the route of actually figuring out net metering. It all seemed quite an effort. And I'm just saying that somebody who is even wanting to do this is also not interested in taking extra effort to try and make all the ducks line up. And so it is quite a challenge, speaking from a consumer perspective, to first of all decide that, yes, I want to do this extra thing when I can afford my electricity that's coming to my house, especially if I live in a city, in a way that's quite acceptable to me. And it's not it's not the MSMEs who actually have an economic benefit from all of this. But over a period of time, I've realized that I don't face absolutely any electricity cuts, to the point that my daughter, who was born after the solar panels went up, hasn't really experienced electricity outages. So, something I grew up with candles and all of that is not a reality for her. And so she expects this sort of very privileged quality of electricity coming into the house. And I keep reminding her that that's because we have these solar panels on our roof. And I'd like to say that, and I pay only a bill of 300 rupees a month for my, for my electricity, and I do rely on the means for certain things. So I want to say that I don't think an effort has been made, serious effort has been made to get consumers to want solar panels on their roof. And I don't think that even as advocates of this, we have done anything that is really catchy in trying to get urban consumers who can afford solar to actually put it up on their roofs. So I think there's a huge effort that is required, and we need to make quite an effort at a consumer campaign if we want solar rooftop uptake to significantly increase. And we need to do that if we even want producers to become sort of voices for policy change and collectivize, like we heard Vishnu say. So maybe I'll stop there.
So some of the points you mentioned were in terms of policy, utility, and technical issues that consumers face. There has been this ongoing conversation about the 100 units. So I would like to ask you, at a time, just to play devil's advocate here, at a time when tariffs have increased and there is inflation, and when consumers are actually budgeting their every month, like how much they can spend on what, is it fair to ask them to give up these free 100 units?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, we've gotten used to freebies everywhere. I mean, that's the first thing I would like to say. When all the governments, the newly elected governments also are getting voted by promising a lot of freebies, whether it's 100 units of power in some states, 300 units of power, and so on and so forth. Now, if that is this thing, why should a freebie be given to, as he just pointed out, people who have air conditioners at home? I mean, we don't deserve it in the first place. So everybody's gotten used to these freebies, and the governments also are unable to come out of it once it has been promised. It's like agricultural power. I mean, Gujarat was the first state to implement charging for agricultural power, but then, okay, giving it as a direct benefit transfer outside of it. Now, all the utilities, as we were discussing this morning, the utilities really need to delineate from what the government promises are. The government may promise this, but the government can take it in their books and not in the utility books, which then gets spoiled, and utility is really stuck between the government and the consumer. The promises made by the government and the consumer. So really speaking, this 100 units of power at some point in time has to go. At least there can be an upward negative this thing. If you're consuming 200 units onwards, the tariff increases in a grade-wise scale, which we had talked about from the MCCI. How it could be a graded scale, which is there in many states like Karnataka. Mumbai charges fancy amounts for the power that is consumed. So at some point, I think wiser counsel will prevail and these things would go.
No, I would agree to some extent on him. You cannot compare the freebies given to agriculture to the freebies given to the consumers, the middle class consumers. Both are two different issues and have to be dealt differently. Free power to agriculture, it's a much needed one, and free power to middle class consumers is not needed one. So we cannot treat both the freebies at the same level or the same scale. Both has to be treated differently. This is what I would like to add. And the modernization of Tamil Nadu per se is in the last 50, 60 years. I know when I was studying in Mettur, the local MLA promised the people of that constituency that he will set up a thermal power plant. That was his political or poll assurance that he gave. So you have to look at Tamil Nadu from that perspective, how we have seen electricity, how we have seen energy, and how we have used or abused, whichever way it is, in the last 50, 60 odd years. So I think the answer lies in taking up a comprehensive look on the entire energy sector per se.
Yeah, if I just may add, I think we should remember that there's nothing for free. So somebody will have to pay for it, and if it's paid by the state government, where does the state government get its money from in the first place? So it's basically just a redistribution of the money that comes in the first place from the citizens. So I think the question is the subsidy targeting the right people? Is it reaching the people that really need it, and not whether to be surrender or not surrender?
Yeah, and I think I'd just like to add, I absolutely agree with what Sundar and Martin have said. In addition, I think I'd like to say that there is a massive cognitive dissonance with the climate crisis we live in and what we're willing to do to actually address the crisis. So, if it's giving up 100 units of electricity, that would hopefully, then we need to know where that money goes. But if that's going to be redistributed and we know how it's being redistributed, what we're going to pay or what we're going to lose, if that is in some way connected to a positive action that we can do. I think, I agree this morning when, Mr. Ton set the sort of context for today's discussion. Lifestyle changes are going to be, we did not realize how critical they are, but they are going to be extremely critical in addressing the climate crisis. Because in many ways, a lifestyle shift signals to the political class a will of citizens for change. And so unless we're actually mobilizing that will to actually see a transformation, we're largely going to be in the space of tinkering small things, which is not going to get us where we want. And as long as we are in the space of tinkering and incremental change, it is not going to be possible for a conference for a COP, for political leaders to go there and make drastic commitments. As long as public behavior is not signaling the desire for transformation. And so I think we need to be creative in thinking how those, and there's definitely no doubt that lifestyle changes have also to be transformative. and not merely just a small change in, say, giving up 100 units. Those are the small, low-hanging fruit. So hopefully you're going to be able to win those.
So while I agree that it is important to give it, I do think it's going to be quite a struggle to wrench it out of people's hands. And they're used to a certain amount of, like Martin said, I wouldn't call it free, but some sort of subsidized electricity. It is going to be challenging to get people to give it up. So this next question I have is to Mr. Sampath. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Sir, I want to ask you, as far as the industry is concerned, Deepak had made a presentation just before this from WRI, where he said that awareness about installation of rooftop solar itself is very low amongst MSMEs. Would you like to comment on this? Is this a conversation even happening in this ecosystem? He has to be unmuted. Can you unmute yourself, sir?
Regarding MSME, that solar power is not economical at present because there are challenges that there is no continuous production. Non-business hours, they are shut down. At that time, they have to export to grid. The EB give only 2 rupees and something. So that is not economical at present for MSMEs.
Okay, does the rest of the panel agree with this, Mr. Venkatachalam, Mr. Sundarajan, Martin?
In fact, at MCCI, we had worked along with Martin regarding the solar policy itself. Apart from the net metering, we talked about the awareness itself, and when a farmer is already getting free power, why would he invest in solar? But for the residents and others, there was a 10 kilowatt clause also. Of course, the first foremost, residents were not even aware of the solar policies. Like Vinuta said, she didn't even know where to go to start with. I mean, that's the situation even today. Now, in the net metering, they had offered a rate which is equivalent to the kind of discovered tariffs in the competitive bidding. Now, that will not work. That will work out for 100 megawatt solar power installation, but it will definitely not work for a few kilowatts that you put up in your home. So this definitely is not a viable proposition, as he rightly pointed out.
Yeah, if I may not contradict you, but there was a change in regulation actually. So now the tariffs are actually fairly interesting and fair. So for the first time, I think in India, a regulator has set capacity-specific tariff. So where you get a higher tariff for smaller systems and a lower tariff for larger systems. So the tariff used to be 2 rupees, but right now the highest tariff is, if I remember, 3.67 rupees per kilowatt hour. So I think the tariffs are really well done and well designed. The bottleneck Tuan pointed out in the morning is now that a new component has been introduced, which is the network charge, which is being levied on the cross generation of rooftop solar. That means even for your own consumption, you're paying a tax. And Tuan used to tease me and always give the example of, if I grow my vegetables at home and I sell maybe half of the vegetables, but I pay a tax on the vegetables I even consume myself and grow myself. So, but having said all this one, even despite the network charges, looking at the tariff that MSMEs pay, rooftop solar still works out better on a per unit cost even after the network charges. So the problem may not be attractive or not, it is maybe do they have the means of financing it? Or can we look at RESCO models that could be more widely promoted for MSMEs?
So this is something Mr. Sundarajan has also mentioned several times when we spoke about how these MSMEs or industries, they have huge tracts of land, and AVC has also done a study where they looked at the Mayiladurai district and found that a lot of unused land, I think out of 20,000 acres, around 6,000 acres were meeting the technical criteria for solar. Is this something that we can explore, Mr. Sampath, since you feel that this is not an economical proposition?
At present, MSME, usually they are in LT service, less than 100 kilowatt. Hence, they could not avail renewables source to open access. So, individually, if we install, that is not a economical one.
Okay, so since he brought up the subject of open access, there's a lack of clarity about open access as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned. Karnataka has it. Center has notified it in June, if my memory serves me right. Could you tell us what the status of open access is as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, and what has to be done to make the conditions right to implement it correctly? Martin, could you answer that?
Maybe just that the question is clear. It's green open access. So
Yeah,
open
green
access
open
has
access.
been here.
Correct,
So there
green
was,
open access.
I think in June this year, Ministry of Power notified that or requested the states to introduce green open access. The change is that till now, as a consumer, you could only avail open access if you had a sanction load of 1 megawatt. Now, with the green open access rules, that has been reduced to 100 kilowatt, so which makes it also attractive possibly for some of the MSMEs. So far, I'm aware that only Karnataka has introduced it. So I have been told TNAC is working on it in Tamil Nadu. But maybe I ask my colleague here to go into the what are the required conditions to make this successful.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So I think there has to be a complete policy change on the MSME sector is saying it is not economically viable, whereas the study by Araval Consulting says there are thousands of acres which could be utilized for a solar production. So their combination should be like this green open access and also the RESCO model. If some solar developer can tie up with the land that the MSME owns and produce and give it to them, and rest could be sold to the grid on a net metering basis or any other tariff basis, which is profitable for the consumer and for the generator also. I think that policy level will work only if it's a RESCO model is implemented in Tamil Nadu, where any solar developer can come and set up using the land that is available with the MSME, and it can be given to MSME at a fixed cost, and the rest could be sold to the utilities. I think that policy will will bring a lot of interest from the MSME sector to move towards solar. And also, I would like to add one word of caution. Tamil Nadu industrialized long back in the 1950s, 60s. Our textile industry or our automotive industries, we industrialized in 1950s, 60s. All our Coimbatore, Tirupur, Ambattur estates, all this became active in the 50s and 60s.
Correct.
So all our MSME sector needs to have a energy efficiency transition model. The government should incentivize the MSME to go in for energy efficient motors, energy efficient drives, because all these motors and drives were installed about 30, 40 years, where it is energy, the energy efficiency is pretty low. But today I've got very high energy and efficiency drives and motors. So even the requirement might come down to 25 to 30% if MSME is subsidized to move towards the energy efficient motors and drives, and then think about bringing them into the green open access by a RESCO model. So even the requirement will definitely drop down if you are able to implement the efficiency very strongly with the MSME sector of Tamil Nadu.
All right, Mr. Venkatacham, do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think they've covered most of the points. I mean, it is all about giving more amount of, creating more amount of awareness for the MSME sector, because there's more focus on the large-scale solar installations and the large-scale wind installations. The MSME sector needs to be brought forward to say that there are certain incentives. Okay, we are trying to improve upon it, but then over a period of time, as he said, rightly pointed out, we need to improve the efficiencies across the sector itself.
I think Menuta would like to add about a success story as far as this is concerned.
Yeah, I just want to bring in, I guess, another sort of consumer in some sense, which is the panchayats. That is it possible for gram panchayats to actually collectivize and be also prosumers of renewable energy? So I wanted to share an example of a panchayat in Kerala called the Perinyanam Panchayat, where of course it required, I think, the foresight of some of the panchayat leaders to see this as a viable option for the panchayat. And there was such a forward-looking leader in the Perinyanam Panchayat, one of the presidents of the panchayat, Mr. Sachit, who sort of felt that this was a possibility for the panchayat. But what did happen, I think, which we should sort of pay attention to, is that they ran awareness programs within the panchayat of how this would help the panchayat. And that went on for a few months. So it was not a one-off meeting where, you know, people were collected and said, this is something that you can do. And in 2000, and they managed to create a committee of consumers who were willing to actually put this up. And after that, they also, as a panchayat, enabled a loan which had no need for any guarantee against that loan. And I mean, the panchayat stood guarantee. And they managed to get 727 households within the panchayats to sign up for becoming solar rooftop producers. They also managed, through this committee, to negotiate with SECI to give them the subsidy. But they again faced the challenge with who should be the actual installer. And they actually had challenges with the company that did the installation not being up to mark. So, I mean, that challenge, I think, continues to be something important. But what was important in this panchayat was that there was collectivization, there was an ability to access finance through the cooperative society, through the cooperative banks. And when they actually reached that stage, the government helped them in popularizing this as being a vision for possibly Kerala. So the chief minister comes down and inaugurates the thing. So the panchayat feels proud about what it did. So I do feel that maybe we are also, I mean, in addition to MSMEs, which is a really important consumer, we should also be looking at our other governance systems and our other consumers who have the ability to collectivize. And the panchayats probably are an example. We're also happy that the Tamil Nadu government, through its Rural Development Ministry, actually sent 37 panchayat presidents from Tamil Nadu to Perennianam to go and see if that model was interesting to them, and to actually, you know, have conversations with the consumers and so on. And about 15 of them came back very interested in developing this in their panchayats, which then hopefully we as a community are able to support and take forward. Because it requires sort of spreading for it to be viable and be taken up. I think the other important thing in this is that the panchayat actually owns, they are truly prosumers, in that this is not something that's been set up by somebody else. So they actually own, and they've created self-help groups that maintain the system. They've trained their youth. So when there's a problem with the system, it's on a WhatsApp group, and the young people within 24 hours resolve the problem. So it's a working system that they feel very proud about.
Thank you, Vanuta. So just before I get back to what she said, I want to ask Mr. Sampath and Mr. Venkatachalam, as far as MSMEs and industries are concerned, he spoke about the economical problems as well in terms of switching to renewable energy. But are there any other issues as far as technical or any other policy kind of issues that you're facing? Mr. Venkatachalam, could you answer that?
Yeah. See, okay, I'll give you some bit of my experience as far as the Orient Green Power is concerned. We were an independent power producer, I mean, producing wind and biomass. Okay, the biomass itself has become a dead industry. I mean, they may count it as 10,000 megawatts of available power, but hardly anything is operating in the country. Wind started off, I mean, Tamil Nadu started off with the first being the pioneers in wind. They started with a lot of wind, and as it increased, during the time when there were power cuts, they used to absorb all the wind, but from 2014 to 2018 roughly, they were not able to absorb most of the wind. And the companies who were supplying wind power were subject to a lot of grid backdown during the wind season. I mean, because they were not able to absorb the amount of infirm power. So that became an issue, and then the wind associations started working with the Tamil Nadu government to get that absorbed, and then over a period of time from some 60-70% grid availability to about 95% grid availability, which a lot of work was done, and Tamil Nadu was quite proactive. And but in the meanwhile, the companies like Orient Green Power, we lost more than 200, 250 crores, and we were in a situation with the banks, which is we were not able to pay them on time, and so on and so forth. Second thing which Tamil Nadu always suffers is the payment schedules itself, which is something which the industry faces. I mean, even the producers of wind power, mainly the textile associations you can see in Tirupur area, they are large producers of wind power, owners of windmills. But then if you're supplying on a group captive basis, you're kind of okay. But then if you're supplying to the Tamil Nadu government, you had it. I mean, there is no, I mean, you can never manage your cash flows and so on and so forth. So it has come a long way. And if you see really the wind installations in the last few years has really come almost nothing, not only in Tamil Nadu, but also in India. So the industry definitely will not install more windmills. I mean, solar is the way to go for most of the industry across India and across Tamil Nadu.
Mr. Sampath, do you have to add to that?
At present, that MSME, energy efficient activities, we are already taken up individual unit as well as association. Medicia already conduct energy audit meeting last week. Around 60 members, 60 industries participate in that, and 35 members agree for energy audit. We started the energy audit. Tamil Nadu Industrial Development Corporation, they are provide 70% subsidy for energy audit. That is welcome measures. And doing energy, that is after energy audit, implementation for that, they give 50% subsidy. That also welcome move. MSME, definitely we get some type of relief for this current situation. But we have to think in mind one thing, that we have compete with the China product. China product import is around 20% increase every year. They are success because all input costs are cheaper, including power cost. So TANGEDCO minimize the gap between the purchase cost and selling cost. Then only industrial growth will be more as we expected. That is our main concern.
Martin, do you want to respond to that? Do you think that what kind of steps can be taken at this point to help MSMEs further?
Good challenge. I think maybe it brings us back to your question that hasn't been really answered. Is I think you ask, you know, what are the conditions for green open access to be successful? And then I think one condition, of course, that it is attractive for MSMEs to participate, and that the cost of green open access, of energy of green open access, is lower than what they would pay today to TANGEDCO. So that's definitely one. Second condition is, of course, it needs to work for TANGEDCO, because we cannot continue let TANGEDCO bleed. So it needs to be a win-win, not only for the MSMEs in TANGEDCO, but also for the general society as such. So I'm, you know, talking about economic benefits, social benefits, and environmental benefits. And I think very often those are the benefits that are overlooked when we set tariffs or when we make this kind of regulations.
So just coming back to what Vinota had said, she spoke about the panchayat and how well they did. One of the problems she mentioned there was with developers and some problems concerning how it was installed. So recently I was going through the CAG website where they had met prosumers who had installed rooftop solar, and they had also mentioned that they were facing several challenges with developers. So I would just want to ask the panel, like, how to address these challenges. For example, like, it's in two parts. In one way, it is to do with the utility. For example, they do not get, like we already discussed, net metering on time. And the second challenge over there is there are not enough people who are equipped in the TANGEDCO to handle this kind of rooftop solar and the maintenance or whatever kind of work it requires. And on the other side, there are developers who don't do what they promise or don't deliver the kind of material that the consumers are looking for. So these challenges, how do we address for prosumers or consumers?
My words might sound harsh, but the reality is TEDA should be completely revamped. If TEDA is completely revamped and if Tamil Nadu has to meet its RPO targets or rooftop solar or KUSUM, I think TEDA has to be looked at very seriously. Unfortunately, that's one thing that has been lagging in Tamil Nadu for at least a decade now. The power and the influence that TANGEDCO wields on the governance structure, equally TEDA should be equally responsible and made to work in such a way TANGEDCO works, though it is sister organizations. But TEDA is very weak in Tamil Nadu. To bring any policy implementation in Tamil Nadu, be it net metering, be it green open access, be it certifying the solar developers, TEDA is the nodal agency. So I think TEDA has to become more efficient and more influential.
Okay. So since you brought up TEDA and I haven't, I have to go to Martin and ask him about his thoughts.
I mean, we also have Mr. Shankar Nair in the room, and maybe he wants to come in later. It's a sensitive topic, but yeah, I think the question has to be asked, what is the future of TEDA? Because now with renewable energy maybe not being an alternative form of energy, but one that is well established, do we still need a department whose main objective is the promotion of renewables? And if we do so, what is the future role? Because in the past, TEDA was primarily, not only, but primarily channeling funds that came from the central government, like for rooftop solar subsidy. Now this has now moved with maybe about 1 or 2 years ago to TANGEDCO already. So yeah, I think I fully agree with you. One has to question, what is the future role of TEDA? Maybe it's a different role, or maybe TEDA could be merged eventually with TANGEDCO. But maybe just continuing on this one, and I think Sundar also hinted at it, it came also up yesterday. So another thing is the independence of our regulators. To what extent is the Regulatory Commission independent today? That's a second topic. And lastly, again, it was mentioned yesterday, the separation of distribution and generation hasn't happened yet in Tamil Nadu.
Correct. So one more problem that came up while researching on the subject was violations by builders. Like if you have more than 5 floors in a residential building, 1/3 of the space has to be reserved for rooftop solar. Very rarely is that happening. I don't think I've seen any buildings in Chennai or the rest of Tamil Nadu really follow this. In fact, there have been instances where builders hire solar panels and leave them and there's an inspection and then give it back to whoever they rented it from. So what kind of strict laws have to be brought in, and if the laws already exist, how should it be implemented in a manner that builders are held accountable in such situations? Sundarajan, so would you like to answer?
So always the difficult question comes to me. Like TEDA, if there is 2 more departments that needs to be completely brought to task is CMDA and DTCB. So if CMDA is able to implement its own rules and regulations, see in our country, there is no dearth for rules and regulations and laws. We may have dearth of food or energy access, but there is definitely no dearth for laws and rules. The problem lies with the implementation agencies. If CMDA is able to pull up its socks and say, boss, we will not give the completion certificate unless you install the solar panels in the rooftop as per the guidelines, we will no occupant of your flat system or your flats will be able to enter the premises. There ends the story. You don't need rocket science to implement these rules. Basically, implementation agencies should be more aggressive on implementing their own rules. That solves most of the problems.
So Vanatha, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree that we have enough laws and rules, and the challenge is implementation. The other aspect I think that we are only beginning to now understand is that we also have to have normative shifts in behavior. We have to start thinking certain behaviors are bad behaviors and certain are good. For example, the smoking issue, the number of the anti-smoking, I mean, the fact that we have spaces which are available for smoking and other spaces are not available. The social sanction for this, I remember growing up with people smoking inside a room and not being able to say, I don't like that. But now that's not the case, and that's been a fairly recent sort of shift in social sanction. So I think while this happens, I think the climate emergency also has to sink in, and we have to start thinking of certain behaviors as almost a threat to society. And these kind of behaviors and certain behaviors as being really good for society, like taking a bus is really good. We have to start believing that we're doing something good by doing that. And then the systems will also start responding. So I'm not saying the systems, obviously the institutional systems have to function for the purposes they were set up. But in addition, we have to really start working at social behavior shifts. Otherwise, we're not going to see, the kind of transformations we require. We're also always going to be stuck in this thing of the rule is there and we fought for the rule and then nobody implemented the rule.
So, like from what I see from this conversation, it comes down to implementation. Oh, sorry, sir. Do you want to add to it? No, please go ahead. I'll ask.
I think very good points have been made about TEDA itself. See, when I joined the renewable industry about 12, 13 years back, I thought TEDA would be the agency to go to, but then everything went on to only to Tangitco itself. Then regarding the buildings, of course, India has been a classic case of violation of all building norms, whether it is occupying the water bodies or whatever. So it's, I think, sea change has to come in the attitudes of the people and the enforcement. I mean, India is a country which we don't even observe traffic rules or garbage laws. I mean, these are the first two things when you go abroad. These first two things you see is traffic and garbage are the first two things that strike you. Oh, this is something quite different. I think a lot of things have to come from public awareness, our own ability to enforce certain things, and then over a period of time, I think the governments themselves will start to realize that these things cannot be done. You cannot keep violating norms like this. I mean, it's going to take years of kind of not really a protest, but a silent kind of movement by the public itself. I mean, that's one thing which is going to come. Then we were also talking about the panel quality. I mean, not just the implementers of the solar rooftops, etc., but the panel quality itself, most of it coming from China. Okay, India will start manufacturing, but then there is definitely, I mean, I don't think it even delivers the PLF or even the kind of deterioration in panel quality year on year. People assume it to be 0.5% on an Excel sheet, but then it is far, far more than what it is, it's been assumed. So I think a lot of things which, of course, over a period of time, these things, I do believe that there will be a lot of positive energies coming up and a lot of things will improve over a period of time.
So what I wanted to ask is, on one side, like based on what you are saying, you have Tangitco, TEDA, or CMDA, or whichever implementing agency, and on the other side, you have government. This is not just for Tamil Nadu, even the center in different states. Governments are making one announcement after another about renewable energy, wanting to bring this much solar, this much wind, offshore wind. We've been having those conversations, but on the other end, the implementation is lacking. There's a huge gap between what the government, successive governments are saying and what the implementing agencies are doing. How do we bridge this gap to make it easier for the consumer? What can the consumer in this sense do, correct? Because if there are technical issues, utility issues, and like Vinuta said, even if you have the intention to put up solar panels or depend on renewable energy, if it's so difficult to achieve that, So what is the solution here? How do we get to that point where the implementation is where the intention is?
Yeah, I mean, again, once again, going by my experience, first of all, um, as I said, wind itself over the last few years has been killed by basically competitive bidding. Now, competitive bidding was introduced and the central government was quite thrilled that they're able to get lesser and lower rates, and they were quite thrilled about it. And when we talked to the power ministers, they used to say that you guys have quoted these kind of rates. It was started off with 4.5 rupees and 3 rupees 46 paise. Then it went down to 2.5 rupees, and solar even went down to 199, and so on and so forth. Now, if the one is, you can blame the governments for the competitive bidding, but you need to blame the bidders themselves who have quoted such low rates. And I always say that Excel sheets are the biggest enemies of mankind. You know, you can actually, I can prove a 1 rupee rate also on wind or solar using an Excel sheet and still justify myself. Now, wind, luckily the government has realized, and they are going to come out of competitive bidding. They will be having basically the old tariff structures designed by the regulators, but you will see that it is not going to go up by much because the regulators are also hesitant to go above 3 rupees. Now, wind definitely is not economical above 3.5 rupees at the present rate of 6 crore plus per megawatt. The costs are not going down like in solar panels. So this is, the wind industry itself has been going through a lot of this thing, but I do see some potential for the wind basically coming out of the when they're coming off the competitive bidding. Like we were just discussing this morning, the Suzlon rights issue has now gained a lot of ground because people see that there is going to be some amount of potential or some amount of I mean, people would like to install a little more in terms of wind energy. Solar has, I mean, definitely has picked up a huge amount because the tariff structure, the panels being available at lower rates, of course, despite a few uncertainties about the kind of import duty structures, okay, they did support it to a certain extent for the available SECI orders which people have taken. But in the future also, unless India starts manufacturing at those competitive rates, solar will have its push and pull. But in the overall, though we set 175 gigawatts of power, I mean renewable energy by 2022, we have already seen, but there has been some positive movement. I mean, I knew 175 is not going to be achieved unless I study to get 100% marks. I will still get, then at least I'll get 70. If I don't, if I achieve, I mean, aim only for 60, 70%, I'll only get 40%. That we all know this. And the third thing was biomass. I mean, biomass is an industry. I can talk endlessly about it because we shut down all our biomass units. We had 12 of them in Orient Green Power, totaling to about 105 megawatts. We shut down all of them, saying that this is not a viable proposition. Only Rajasthan was a little bit viable. I mean, it's an industry, though they are counting 10,000 megawatts, it is just not there. Now, the biggest issue with the entire renewable energy industry is I mean, what the center states and what the states, because the federal structure, I mean, that is one thing. There's definitely a lot of gap between what the center says and what the utilities, because utilities are under stress. They are unable to implement. I mean, they cannot go beyond a point. That's why a good thing that the SECI tenders came with assured payment terms. The biggest, I mean, challenge that I faced as at Orient Green Power is the payment terms. I don't mind a little bit of here and there as far as rates are concerned, but we suffered a lot as far as payment from Tamil Nadu. Okay, we were predominantly in group captive. We had a huge amount of problem with the Andhra government. They were not paying on time. I mean, they suddenly said, though we had signed PPAs at 4 rupees 70 paise, they said, suddenly they came up with the rule saying that you will get only at 2 rupees 43 paise, and that too after a year. This did not go to the courts for more than 3 years. The government did not allow it to come to the High Court. And for the High Court, it was just a 10-second decision. You got a PPA? Okay, done. I mean, it doesn't take any time for anybody to understand that a PPA has to be honored. It's a sovereign document that you signed. So the states, it's the only if the discoms start performing better, they will start towing the line of the center and start implementing, let's say, the 500 gigawatts by 2030, and so these ambitious targets, but at least we'll start getting there if the states also take part in the entire process.
Okay. So Vinitha, you had spoken about the village in Kerala. Now Tamil Nadu has identified 10 smart villages where they want to bring in renewable energy there in terms of solar and other things. What do you think we should be prepared for? How do we overcome the challenges that we've already discussed?
Yeah, I think India has had a tradition of movements, and the movements have resulted in fairly, quite pioneering legislations, including the right to information, Manrega and so on. So I think we need to think also a little bit about this energy transformation as a movement, and not merely a technical or it is ultimately something that's sitting within a political economy. And how does that political economy shift to actually make this energy transition possible? So I think many of the challenges have been solved. Maybe we have some policies in place. We have some, the costs of renewable have drastically dropped. Storage is being figured out. We of course have to address consumption and efficiency and so on. But I think unless we're actually seeing this as building and mobilizing political will to support this thing, and it's very hopeful to hear Supriya Sahu yesterday as well as Mr. Vikram Kapoor support this transition. And it's going to require that kind of will. And so I'm hoping that the Tamil Nadu Climate Company, the fact that the Chief Minister is sitting at the head of the Climate Council, that all of this signals a desire for Tamil Nadu as a state to become a leader in this transition. And that in some ways, like you said, the state really is an extremely important space for this change. So it's no longer about the huge targets that we have, the 500 gigawatts and so on, but it's how is that going to be implemented at the state, at the district, at the village level. And that's the shift we need to enable in some ways as a community.
Martin and Sundaran, do you want to add to this?
I think in the last 1 hour we've been sugarcoating many things. But if really Tamil Nadu has to move on the distributed RE front seriously, I think the mindset of the power managers has to change. It's very open. TANGEDCO's mindset has to change. Unless it changes from that, for them it is a very easy job. Put up a 1100 megawatt plant in North Chennai, that too only North Chennai, not in Besant Nahar or somewhere else, only in North Chennai. Blow up coal, pollute the area, produce power. They are not interested to have a smart grid, microgrid, inform power. How do we manage that? How do we incorporate renewable energy into this whole system? Unless this mindset of TANGEDCO changes, which unfortunately is their mindset for the past 50, 60 or 70 odd years since it was set up. Unless this mindset of TANGEDCO changes, that they have to work hard. They cannot be a lackluster performance from TANGEDCO. They have to agree the era of coal is over. The era of distributed renewable energy is here. And even on the renewable energy front, they can't allow 7,000 acres of pastoral lands in Kamudi to set up a huge solar power plant. No, that can't also happen. So it has to be distributed renewable energy, which TANGEDCO should ensure, and it has to work. Basically, all the engineers of TANGEDCO, I foresee a situation or an era where all the substations of TANGEDCO become generating stations. It's an ideal ask, but that is the kind of DRE that Tamil Nadu should ensure, and we get into that performing TANGEDCO. But unfortunately, is the opposite is happening. I read a fantastic critique written by Martin on the tariff revision plan that TANGEDCO had submitted. Even by 2026-27, 85% of our new power will come from coal. Even in 26-27, the Ministry of Power asks your power to be RPO should be 35%. Tamil Nadu's RPO will be 15%. By 29-30, you should be 43%. We will be much lesser than what it is. A state which powered, which ushered in renewable energy is completely lagging. It's completely behind what it should have done. Only reason is, according to us, is the mindset of our power managers. Unless as a political civil society groups, we put pressure on the power manager, on the political system to come out of this mindset that yes, the era of centralized power production is over, be it renewables, be it fossil fuels. The era is going to be the distributed renewable energy. I think Tamil Nadu will not be able to move forward in any front on DRE. This is our opinion.
Martin, how is this affecting the consumer? At the end of the day, the consumer's at the heart of this, and they are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of any policy disturbances, not following already existing regulations. So how is this affecting this kind of gap between what is said and what is done? How is it affecting the consumer?
Difficult question. I mean, there's a lot of consumers in the room. But let me go somewhere else. I'm not sure whether I'm able to answer your question, but I want to still add to your previous question. It's connected. I think, and Sundar also pointed it out, I feel there is a lack of ownership of those targets. And Vinod also, you know, it comes from the center primarily, then the state has to swallow it. Even if the state has its own target, do the panchayats share those targets? Are the corporations share those targets? And very often, to be honest, those targets are owned by the officer that was at this point in time sitting in the chair of the institution that has set these targets. So they are not even institutionalized targets very often.
So we spoke about the tariffs. So I wanted to ask, in 2008, Andhra Pradesh became the first state to introduce the green tariff in India. And I think they'd set a premium rate of rupees 6.7 per kilowatt hour. After that, I think Karnataka introduced it, and they gave an additional 1 kilowatt, rupees 1 per kilowatt hour. So other states that followed suit were Maharashtra, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh. So the green tariff has been introduced in Tamil Nadu through the new tariff order. So what can we expect from this? Deepak had said in his presentation as part of WRI that the indications don't seem very positive as far as green tariff is concerned. Mr. Sampath, would you also like to weigh in on this? As far as the green tariff is concerned, how do you see Tamil Nadu adopting it? Okay, we'll wait for him to come back. Martin, would you like to talk to us about the green tariff and what would be the conditions we need to create for it to succeed when it hasn't done very well otherwise?
Yeah, I think Deepak really has pointed it out. So as long as the green tariff is higher than green power would be over the open access route, and as long as I can avail the open access route, there's very little incentive for a CNI consumer to go for the green tariff. Now with the green tariff in Tamil Nadu, the details also haven't been worked out yet. So there's a question, do I get the REC, the Renewable Energy Certificate or not? So there's a lot of question marks, but definitely as it is being said today, it is more affordable for a CNI consumer that can either go for the green open access if it comes, or for the current open access regulations to procure renewable energy power over that route.
Okay, Sundarajan sir, do you want to add to this?
I think from a consumer perspective, green tariff may not be accepted widely by all the consumers. So probably, that would, if it helps, when, as Martin has said, the finer details are being awaited, what is the kind of tariff that they're going to fix, or what is the modalities of doing that. But I think if it helps to set up their own rooftop solars on the other side, instead of paying a higher tariff for a renewable energy power, if I'm able to set up, if it gives an incentive for the consumers to set up their own rooftops, in that way it'll be helpful for people to have their own rooftops solar instead of paying a higher price for the green power that the utilities will give. So if we can help that way, I think we'll have to wait for the results to come in. How the consumers accept this, how they foresee this, how they take this as a proposition in terms of energy tariffs. We'll have to wait and see for the results to come in.
Okay, and would you like to add to this, Mr. Venkatachalam, like about green tariffs? Because there has not been much success anywhere else. Like, what are the conditions we can create to make it work?
I think it's still too early because the green tariffs, they're just trying to introduce it, but it is, I mean, there's not much. And as he rightly pointed out, if the tariffs are too high, obviously, why would anybody go in for green power? I mean, I would rather, and the consumer doesn't really care. I mean, consumers out here, we are not even aware whether they're buying green power or the normal power. But I think it's still a long way to go as far as green tariffs are concerned.
You spoke about consumer awareness overall, and we've also touched upon the subject quite a bit in our conversation so far. Vinita had spoken about bringing about awareness campaign. She gave smoking as an example. But to make it more targeted in our current situation now, what kind of efforts have to be taken by both civil societies and by the government to make distributed renewable energy something of an everyday conversation for people? It's somehow, see, like the regular consumer finds it too technical to really discuss. How do we simplify it for them? How do we make them also a more important stakeholder in this conversation?
So I think the entire perspective of energy should be revisited, both from the consumer side and the utility side. This example that I will say now, I've said this the same stage in May 22nd, the same WRI meet. So there is a mall in Chennai which consumes about 12,000 units in an hour. In 1 hour, they consume about 12,000 units. There's my village, which is in Tirunelveli district. We need about 1,000 units per day. So whatever energy that our village needs for 12 days, this mall consumes in 1 hour. And our government ensures 24 hours power for this mall and 10 hours power for my village. So we'll have to question this development paradigm. If we are not able to question this development paradigm, we will not be able to go towards DRE or RE or anything. Unless and until we question per capita consumption, what we are talking. Our energy per capita consumption of energy is pretty low, not compared to US, not compared to UK, or not compared to any developed countries. That dialogue in the society itself is an impediment for moving towards DRE, because you cannot consume infinitely and produce infinitely. There is something called as finite. Everything is finite. So unless we talk about this consumption pattern, as Vinita had said, and unless we address these consumption patterns, this development paradigm, I think any number of solar panels or any number of discussions, every conference that WRI or anybody organizes should have a session on degrowth. When India got freedom, a famous journalist went and asked Gandhi, do you like to grow like Britain? The question was asked to Gandhi, do you like grow like Britain? Gandhi shot back, are you mad? Some 1.5 crore was the population of Britain at that point of time, roughly about 2 crore, something like that. If 1.52 crore of population can spoil this earth by consuming resources madly, imagine a 33 crore, at that time the population of India was about 33, 35 crores. Imagine a population of 35 crore people country, if we consume the way that UK does, where does the world has enough resources to, to supply this kind of madness? I think this, unless we address this, we have no answers for our energy needs, for energy requirements and things. We will have to address seriously on this development paradigm. Unless this is addressed, and newer development models are suggested, which is sustainable, which is on the long run, we will find it very difficult to meet our climate targets or carbon emission targets or renewable energy targets. We are not going to go anywhere. This is our reply to whatever you want.
Yeah, basically, when I tell people that I've been working in the renewable energy sector, they said, "Wow, renewable energy sector and all that." I mean, and then they'll ask me, why doesn't India or the whole world convert everything to renewable energy? Then you tell them, look here, there are issues, it's intermittent power, there is various other things associated with it. I mean, beyond a point, they're not interested, and it's too technical for them to understand what are the challenges that we go through to implement, whether it is wind energy or solar energy and so on and so forth. So all this sounds really fancy, but it has to start at the government level to make this awareness, or at least the governments have to start implementing and make rules saying that, okay, the policies that we are going to only go for renewable energy. As he said, even after 10, 15 years, if we're going to only have 15% of the energy coming from renewable sources, that's definitely not on. I mean, there has to be a progressive target like there was a thing called a renewable power obligation that each state had to fulfill, and all that has gone by the wayside. Secondly, like he pointed out, we may be consuming less than, let's say, 1,500 units per capita, and US may be consuming 8 to 10 times the amount China may be consuming. But the fact is, do we really need to get there? Are we looking at development only through money or through the kind of power that we consume? I mean, we don't have to compare ourselves with each other by I mean, happiness doesn't come from money or from the power that you consume. I mean, there are various other, I mean, routes to getting developed and being a happier nation as such. I mean, like Mahatma Gandhi rightly pointed out, as he said, that we don't need to get there. I mean, okay, we can consume a fraction of the power, but then let's also look at ways which we can save power, like you said, going by bicycle, or you go to foreign countries. The biggest thing that I find, okay, you have a washing machine, but then the dryer consumes so much amount of energy. Why can't they hang it out into the sun to dry like we all do? Dryer is a huge drain on energy. I mean, even air conditioners, I mean, we've all gotten used to air conditioners. Why can't we keep, in fact, my parents and all, they won't even allow you to operate the fan. They'll say, open the front door and open that door. There'll be a little bit of cross ventilation, but we don't want to be seen by the neighbors nowadays. I mean, that's how we've become. So it's an attitude change that we need, and also an awareness that renewable is something that we're going to go through as a future. We can't keep assuming that coal is going to be the future of the day, or fossil fuels like petrol, diesel, etc. are going to be the future of the day. We have to move towards this thing, and for that, consumers will get more aware if economics also plays. If I run an EV car at less number of rupees per kilometer, then it will slowly start picking up. I think all these awareness will also come through economics as such, not just, otherwise people don't care. I mean, whatever is cheaper, if coal is cheaper, they will go for coal. I mean, that's how it is.
I'm reflecting on what you said, because you mentioned renewables. It's a complex topic, right? But even power is complex, renewable or not. Electronics is complex, cars are complex, so the world is very complex, and we don't need to understand everything, but we still use it all the time. So I don't know whether we should have the expectations for a common person that he or she needs to know the ins and outs of renewables. So I think the best case scenario would be that it becomes a default choice.
Yeah, I think I'd sort of, I mean, I absolutely agree with what Sundar has said, that that some hard questions have to be asked, because otherwise, you know, we operate in our comfort zones, and our comfort zones are to put away things that are very difficult to think about. So I'm glad he asked those questions, but I'd also like to say something hopeful. And I think that in many ways, despite the severe hardships that many people faced during COVID, COVID showed that the government could take fairly drastic action, that people would change behaviors over a short period of time, that awareness about what this illness is could reach the corners of, many people in the world. That, in fact, in India, we saw masks being adopted much better than many parts of the developed world. So I do feel hopeful that that all of these many complex pieces can come together and can deliver, and that because we're going, and of course, COVID was a huge crisis, but we're going to see crisis after crisis after crisis now. So I think in many ways, crisis is going to push us to change, and change faster, and change more ambitiously. And therefore, that we are thinking about how this is going to happen now. But I do think that as we push the boundaries of what's possible now, the future might look very different because we're going to face challenges that are going to definitely ask the hard questions of us and make us contemplate a different kind of life.
Thank you. So finally, I'd just like to ask you about something that Mr. Sundarajan also touched upon earlier. Are alternate procurement models for solar feasible? Is this something that we can look at as we move forward? Martin, would you like to start on that?
Venkat may want to start. No, I mean, yeah, definitely they are feasible. I think there has been, ample examples of where this has worked. And maybe not from the renewable energy sector, but you all may remember the LED lighting scheme by ESL, which, has been one of the very often quoted examples that alternative procurement methods can reduce the cost of technology and, and result in a really widespread adoption. So I think similar models could work for rooftop solar. I would assume that Kusum is an attempt in this as well. It hasn't been taking off as many of us has wished, but it was definitely also an alternative procurement methodology.
Mr. Venkatachalam, would you like to add?
Yeah, I agree with Martin. I mean, that's the only way to go. I mean, alternate procurement has to be thought about, whether it comes to solar panels or various other, I mean, even for equipment across industry. I mean, we'll have to definitely look at alternate procurement models and see how we can manufacture most of it in-house also. I mean, that's something that we need to really look deep within ourselves and take it forward from there.
Yeah, I think different, without compromising the food security, probably an agro PV model could be looked upon, where farmers can produce food and also produce power. So there are a lot of RESCO models could be looked upon. Definitely, there is a need to look at different alternatives to produce solar power. But I would like to add one point, though she has not asked that question. I would like to add one thing. I think as a civil society, as a matured civil society within this room or outside the room, we shouldn't think about setting up new coal-fired plants. Coal power plants, we all know it is not only polluting, it is not only carbon emitting, greenhouse gases, climate change. Over and above all of these things, coal power plants are a caste issue. It's a class issue. We have to discuss that. Why are you setting up coal power plants in North Chennai? Why are you not setting up the coal power plants in Besant Nagar? Because Besant Nagar is a place where the upper caste and the rich people live. North Chennai, fishermen and the tribal communities people live, so you don't bother about them. Unless you have a coal power plant in your immediate vicinity, you will not be able to understand what it does to the society. I think this question, especially if Tamil Nadu doesn't ask this question, there is no point in claiming that Tamil Nadu is a progressive and a state known for its social justice. I think the era of environmental justice have come. Tamil Nadu should transform from a social justice state to an environmental justice state, where the entire paradigm of transformation is being looked from the common man's lens, not from an energy perspective alone, not from a power, not from the air conditioner that you use, but what is the common man? Where does he live? How does he get affected? The Adani power plant in Kamudi has affected thousands of pastoral communities. Do we know them? No, we don't know them. So I think now the era has come that power is no more attached with energy security. It is more attached. It has to be looked at from a common man's perspective. Is our request that we would like to make to the government, to the civil society organizations, and everyone here.
Vinita, you want to add to that?
I agree with Sundar, but I wanted to add on a separate thing, and it sounds somewhat inane after what Sundar has said, but I'll say it nevertheless, which is that I think we also have to look at the financial models that are available for citizens to become solar, start having solar on their rooftop. We have to mobilize the banks. Why is it when I get a call every now and then to get a home loan, I should not get a call to say, do you want a solar rooftop loan? So banks have to start supporting and marketing actively this ability to put solar up on our rooftops. And now, for example, an electric scooter Ather, I can pay a monthly installment and own my Ather at the end of that period, and they're marketing that. But I haven't seen any solar marketing campaign in a way that it actually interests consumers. So I do think, and it's not just individual consumers in an urban context, but I do think even cooperative banks. I've heard multiple times Harish Hande of Selco say that something that was instrumental in shifting access to solar panels was being able to get the banking system to move in Karnataka at the very early stages. So we do have to see how banks and cooperative banks, the private sector banks start really shifting and supporting solar uptake.
Yes, definitely. I agree with all the points made. And Mr. Sundarajan is right in saying that when we talk about renewable energy from the consumer's lens, it's not only about why renewable energy is good, it's also about why the alternate is not good. So that is something that we also need to focus on. I think we also get caught up in our energy, electricity conversations, and anything that has the consumer at the heart of it has social ramifications that we have discussed now. So that was the panel. I was wondering if we could open the open the panel up to questions from the audience. We have Mr. Kannan from Tamil Hindu. Could you give him her mic?
Angalachalam sir, the MSME. MSMEs companies வந்து சோலார் பவர் போடுறதுல பிரச்சனை இருக்குன்னு சொன்னீங்க. ஆனால் ஒரு ஓசூர் மாதிரியோ இல்லை ஸ்ரீபெரும்புதூர் மாதிரியோ இருக்கிற ஆப்பிள் கம்பெனிஸ் இப்போ ஓலா எலக்ட்ரிக் ஸ்கூட்டர் வந்து ஓசூரில் வரப்போகுது. அவங்க எலக்ட்ரிக் ஸ்கூட்டர் கொண்டு வரதுக்கு அதை ப்ரொடக்ஷன் பண்ணுற கம்பெனிக்கு கோல்லேருந்து வர பவர் பிளான்ட்டை தான் யூஸ் பண்ணி அதை ப்ரொடக்ஷன் பண்ண போகிறாங்க. அது வந்து எப்படி சார் சரியாக இருக்கும்? அந்த மாதிரி கம்பெனிஸ் அவங்களே ஒரு ஃபண்டை கிரியேட் பண்ணி அவங்களே அவங்களுக்கு தேவையான அந்த பெரிய இதில் ஓலார் ஃபண்ட்ஸ் போடலாமா, இல்லை சிஎஸ்ஆர் ஃபண்ட்ஸ் அவங்களுக்கு ஏகப்பட்ட சிஎஸ்ஆர் ஃபண்ட்ஸ் இருக்கும், அந்த சிஎஸ்ஆர் ஃபண்டை கிரியேட் பண்ணி அவங்க அதுக்கேற்ற அதுக்குண்டான சான்ஸ் இருக்கா? அந்த ஒரு அண்ட் செகண்ட் கொஸ்டின் இஸ் சுந்தரராஜன் சார்கிட்ட. சுந்தரராஜன் சார் வந்து கவர்மெண்ட்டோட நிறைய ஒர்க் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்காரு. ஆனால் இப்போ சிஎம்டிஏ வந்து நிறைய ஹைரேஸ் பில்டிங்க்கு பர்மிஷன் கொடுக்குறாங்க, நிறைய டெவலப்பர் வந்து போடுறாங்க. ஆனால் அந்த ஹைரேஸ் பில்டிங்ஸை நீங்கள் சொல்லும் போதே நீங்கள் இப்படி இந்த அளவு பில்டிங் கட்டினீங்கன்னா நீங்கள் இவ்வளவு பண்ணாதான் நாங்கள் உங்களுக்கு பர்மிஷனே கொடுப்போம் அப்படின்னு ஒன்று சொல்லலாம். அட்லீஸ்ட் அவங்க வந்து சேட்டலைட் டவுன்ஷிப் வந்து உருவாக்குறாங்க. சேட்டலைட் டவுன்ஷிப்பை ஒரு கிரீன் டவுன்ஷிப்பாக வந்து உருவாக்கலாம். திருமலைச்சில் ஒரு டவுன்ஷிப் போடுறாங்க, தோப்புல ஒரு டவுன்ஷிப் போடுறாங்க, கிரீன் டவுன்ஷிப்பாக உருவாக்கலாம். இப்போ வந்து கிளாம்பாக்கத்தில் ஒரு பஸ் ஸ்டாண்ட் போட்டாங்க. பெஸ்ட் எக்ஸாம்பிள் வந்து சென்ட்ரல் ஸ்டேஷன். இப்போ சென்ட்ரல் ஸ்டேஷனுக்குரிய மொத்த பவர் சோர்ஸுமே வந்து ரினியூபிள் எனர்ஜி மூலம் தான் வருது, அவங்க சோலார் ஆஃப் மூலம் தான் கொடுக்குறாங்க. அதே மாதிரி கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து ஒரு பெரிய ஃபர்னிச்சர் பார்க்கோ இல்லை ஒரு இண்டஸ்ட்ரியோ ஒரு பெரிய பஸ் ஸ்டாண்டோ ஒரு 400 ஏக்கரில் கொண்டு வரும்போது அவங்களே ஒரு 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 500 கோடி செலவு பண்ணி அவங்க போடுறதுக்கு எக்ஸ்ட்ரா ஒரு 100 கோடி செலவு பண்ணி கவர்மெண்ட் பண்ணலாம். அப்படி ஒரு மாடல் வந்து கவர்மெண்ட் ரெக்கமெண்டேஷன் பண்ணுவீங்களா? அதுக்கு சான்ஸ் இருக்கா?
See, as far as green power on the, basically, if you're looking at electric vehicles, it has to be powered by green power. Only then it is called a green, initiative. Otherwise, electric vehicles being powered by coal power doesn't make much sense. Now, today we are producing green power that is available in the grid is about 10-11%. We hope to go to about 20-30% and so on and so forth by 2050 or 2070. Let's hope that the entire power comes from green power, and only then we can look at the entire. It's like green hydrogen. Now there are various colors to hydrogen, from green hydrogen to brown hydrogen, so on and so forth. So hydrogen produced only from green sources is green hydrogen, but with a mix of these, it achieves it gets various different colors like a brown hydrogen and so on and so forth. Now, as far as CSR is concerned, I'm not aware of if anybody in CSR is promoting green renewables. We are investing in green energy like solar and wind out of our own accord. Like basically the textile is in Tamil Nadu came up with a lot of wind power. at that time there was a lot of accelerated depreciation and other things available. So unless there is some, let's say, monetary incentive, people are not going to go just for the love of green energy. No, I don't think the industry will really go for it. But then seeing the overall directive of the government, I think, and with the coal becoming very, very expensive, that is itself a good point which is driving towards green energy. And over a period of time, the not only the green energy, but also the ability to absorb green energy, which Tamil Nadu has done in the last 4 years. But as he said, they're not even projecting more than 15% of energy coming from green. But all this has to come as a directive from the center, and the states have to absorb on their own also. Otherwise, it's not going to go very much forward.
நானும் கவர்மெண்ட் கூடலாம் வேலை பார்க்கல கண்ணா. நான் இப்போ தான் ஏதோ 10 நாள் முன்னாடி ஒரு கமிட்டியில் போட்டிருக்காங்க. பட் நீங்கள் கேட்ட கேள்விக்கு ஒரே ஒரு பதில் தான் சொல்கிறேன். பூவுலை நண்பர்கள் போட்ட சுற்றுச்சூழல் தேர்தல் அறிக்கை, அது வந்து எலெக்ஷனுக்கு முன்னாடி அந்த அறிக்கையை போட்டோம். 1.5 வருஷம் ஆச்சு அந்த அறிக்கையை போட்டு. அந்த அறிக்கையில் நீங்கள் சொல்லிக்க எல்லாமே வந்து இருக்குது. ஸோ இப்போ ஒரு 10 நாள் முன்னாடி ஒரு கிளைமேட் கவுன்சிலில் போட்டிருக்காங்க. நான் ஃபஸ்ட் மீட்டிங் நடக்கலை. ஸோ நீங்கள் கேட்ட எல்லாத்தையும், நாங்கள் சொன்ன எல்லாவற்றையும் செய்வதற்கு என்ன புஷ் கொடுக்க முடியுமோ நிச்சயமாக நம்ம சைட்லேருந்து கொடுப்போம். அதான் எந்த சந்தேகமும் வேண்டாம். நான் வந்து குடிமை சமூக அமைப்பின் சார்பாக தான் நான் அந்த கமிட்டிக்குள்ளே போயிருக்கேன் ஒழிய வேறு யார் சார்பாகவும் நான் போகல. ஸோ சிஎஸ்ஓ சார்பாக தான் வந்து போயிருக்கேன். ஸோ அந்த கவலை உங்களுக்கு வேண்டாம். தேங்க்யூ.
Yes, sir. Could you pass him the mic?
So this question is to Mr. Venkatachalam sir and Martin as well. So the point that I completely agree with you, that financial sustenance of the utility is extremely crucial and important if we really want the utility to start thinking about adopting distributed RE. So one thing that came across in this tariff hike was increase in billing charges, and especially and also fixed charges. So do you think that this increase will have some level of impact on open access procurement, or it could also result in some kind of, say reverse migration, or actually consumers are adopting captive solar, indirectly, even though the utility doesn't want, but because they have increased the fixed charges and wheeling charges, it's indirectly actually helping in growth of distributed solar. So do you think that type of situation can actually occur?
I think the overall intention is to slowly do away with open access. I think that's probably the direction that they want to go. They've always been against open access and group captive also, because they feel that the government, the consumers would like to produce on their own, and that affects the utility itself. And we all know that even the coal plants have been only utilized to about 58 to 68% overall. And so the government, in a way, is kind of discourage open access. I mean, that's clear by the kind of body language. And of course, the wind association, solar associations have been fighting this tooth and nail, and to a certain extent been able to prevail upon the governments. But I think definitely affects the consumer in the long run. I mean, the kind of increase in wheeling charges and various other banking charges and so on and so forth. Now, the government always thinks that the wind guys are making a huge amount of money. I mean, this is a thing that they have to get out of their head, that, okay, why would anybody invest in a particular wind or solar? Only if they see some financial gains out of it. But if they keep changing the rules, it's like in the 15th over of a T20 match, if you say that only 3 bowlers are allowed to bowl, I mean, where will they go? I mean, it is definitely going to affect. You keep changing the rules in the middle of the game, it's not going to work.
I mean, I'm reflecting on it, Sanjay. I think perhaps what I think is the root problem is that Tanjeko has too many hats. So it is into generation business, it is into distribution business, it's into retail business. So if Tanjeko were only a distribution company, it would be delighted to have more players sending electricity through the grid, and they should then have the right, of course, to charge for the costs. So I think we have a conflicting situation because they have too many roles to play at the same time. And thereby we have these convoluted reactions as well. But having said so, even with the current scenario, for captive we have network charges. even then captive may not necessarily be more attractive than open access with increased feed-in charges. It's going to be interesting to see how this pans out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Shankar Sivan. I'm building a startup called WellFund. WellFund is a rooftop solar loan marketplace. So I wanted to actually double click on what Vinuta said, your last point on access to finance. And my point was also regarding that. One of the reasons we found is we've been at it for about a year now. We've spoken to many lenders. The current traction is we have about 15 odd lenders signed up for or in talks for distributed RE, specifically for residential segment and small commercial. One, among the many problems, one is we tell them, why don't you consider this as a consumer durable loan, right? It doesn't happen that way because of, I think if I were to pinpoint at one problem as to why lenders don't do it, it's because the products are not standardized. One rooftop solar, let's say 4 kilowatt in my home, and versus someone else's home could be vastly different. Earthing strip, the panel, MMS, the whole array of things could be different, and therefore that's one of the issues, right? So I think if there is fundamentally one issue, there's no product standardization for rooftop solar, and therefore lenders are wary of taking a bet in this asset class. So my question and also suggestion to someone like Martin is if we are trying to see if we can get lenders engineers on board. For example, one conversation we had recently was with Yes Bank, and we said we're going out of our way to say that we'll do asset maintenance, we'll do performance guarantee, and so on and so forth. But I think they came back and said, why don't you actually do a lender's engineers and report for each rooftop? And that becomes expensive as well, because we've done that. Lenders engineers concept is prevalent for ground mount projects. The cost of that still amortized. The transaction costs still make sense for a ground mount loan, not so much for, let's say, 4 kilowatt, 10 kilowatt projects. So we're trying to solve for this problem where we kind of get someone to certify these different projects that's coming up, where the lenders are also feeling comfortable. So yeah, it's a kind of open-ended question. This is the problem statement we are currently facing. I just wanted to add to whatever you said, Vinuta, that this is probably one of the reasons why lenders are not jumping in. Yeah, thanks.
I mean, it's an open-ended question. I don't have an answer, but just one reflection. You know that, for example, in Germany, something that called Pico Solar is quite popular right now, which may be just one solar panel, and they can directly plug it into a power socket. And that's a product that could be standardized to start with.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Shankar Narayan, Pharmacy and TEDA. There has been a lot of accusation on TEDA and Tanjitco. I would like to reply for that. See, actually, we have a, if you come across this college road, no, you could see there is one solar-based EV charging station. There is one of the first of its kind, I think, in India itself. Actually, when our State Planning Commission, PC Vikram Kapoor sir has come, he has sanctioned 2 more to be installed in Secretariat as well as in Eldagam during my tenure. So it is one good thing. Whenever you go and see, I mean, whenever you cross that college road, you can see, as our Venkatachalam sir was telling, EV is meant for avoiding fossil fuels. If you again charge it with the electricity through fossil fuels, that is the answer to that Hindu Tamil person also, I mean, reporter also. So if you again charge it with the fossil fuel, then the very purpose of EV is defeated. So that is the concept behind this, and we have evolved this during my tenure at TEDA, and we could successfully implement it, and it is there in working in condition. And our British High Commission cars are being charged there. You please visit. I think this could be one of the best thing what TEDA could, I mean, highlight or demonstrate the solar application.
Is it okay?
TEDA has come up with a counter.
I mean, there is nothing personally for us against TEDA. எங்களுடைய ஒரே ரெக்வஸ்ட் டெடாக்கு என்னன்னா டான்ஜெட்கோ எவ்வளோ இன்ஃப்ளூயன்ஷியலாக இருக்காங்களோ அது மாதிரி டெடாவும் இன்ஃப்ளூயன்ஸாக மாறணும்னு சொல்கிறோம். வேற ஒன்றும் நாங்கள் சொல்லி தட்ஸ் அவர் ஆஸ்க், அதான் எங்கள் ஆசை. நீங்கள் டான்ஜெட்கோ தான் நீங்கள் டிசைட் பண்ணுறாங்க, அதேமாதிரி டெடா டிசைட் பண்ணணும். ஏன்னா ஃபியூச்சர் வந்து ரெனியூபிள் எனர்ஜி தான். ஸோ இப்போ நீங்கள் பவர்ஃபுல்லாக இன்ஃப்ளூயன்ஷியலாக யூஸ் பண்ண வர்றது உங்களோட டெடாவோட பாலிசிஸை வந்து ஸ்டேட்டோட மெயின் ஸ்ட்ரீம் கொண்டு வரது முக்கியம் நாங்கள் நினைக்கிறோம். ஸோ இட் இஸ் நத்திங் பர்சனல்.
I don't take it as personal, but the system is like that.
Mr. Tuan had a question.
I think Mr. Sankarnarayan, he was talking about TEDA after you left. So I have just three very quick points. The tariff shock that we discussed yesterday is also an incredible opportunity because now for domestic, solar becomes even more interesting with those tariffs. And I have mentioned during the coffee break to the CAG team that there is a new tariff 1D, which has been introduced. 1D is for the common facilities of apartments. Means the lights and the lights and the lifts and the pumps. So I have recommended to them that we should contact the associations, and there must be thousands of them, because but a tariff of 8 rupees, the tariff 1D is 8 rupees, no slabs, it is flat tariff, which is going to increase by 6% for the next 5 years. It's very, very interesting for associations to put solar. In fact, I'm assisting one association in Aripuram to put it, and I will share the financial model with the CAG team. The second thing is you raised the question about developers' quality and installers. There again, the association that the CAG is going to form, or is forming, the alliance of the collective prosumers, they can exchange information on the quality of the various systems that they have. So then we get a database of, so instead of TNEB empaneling, let's empanel ourselves. And my last point is about the green tariffs. I think we came a little bit too late with them. See, the green tariffs were meant at 10 years ago to when green power was very expensive. The consumer could say, okay, I pay a little extra for getting green power. But today it's the opposite. Green power is cheaper than normal power. So we came a little bit too late with the green tariff. That is my submission.
Thank you, sir. Any other? Yeah, Radhika from AVC.
Thank you for the wonderful panel, and there were some really great insights from that. This is sort of an open-ended question, but do you think we should, what are the ways that we can integrate renewable energy using a bottoms-up approach as opposed to a top-down approach, right from the urban planning perspective to, the design, the building design perspective? So do you think that there could be a dialogue to, change behaviors or, just use a bottoms-up approach as opposed to a top-down approach that we're doing right now?
Do you want someone in particular to?
No, it's just an open. Anyone.
I'm guessing not Martin because she meets him every day. Maybe one of the other two people can answer this.
So I think the Periniana model, at least for us, was a bottom-up approach. It wasn't a top-down approach. It was truly consumers deciding that this was the choice that would make a difference. Also in Bangalore, where I live, very nearby is a massive apartment block called Brigade. And Brigade as an association, there's nothing green about, they don't pretend to be green also. But as a group, they have decided to go solar again for common areas and in addition, because that again reduces their price of how much they're paying for all the lifts and the common area lighting and so on. So I think one is that the bottom-up approach depends on what incentivizes me to go for a solution. And in terms of incentives, so far the incentives are largely driven by costs or by benefits, right? But the question I am left with is, can we incentivize this move for decentralized energy because our world is not going to be sustainable otherwise. I know that's an altruistic thing. At this point in time, it may feel like something good that one has to do. But if in the very near future we actually uh, accept science and internalize it, then it's no longer about being good, but it's literally about saving our futures, right? In some sense. I mean, at this point in time, it still sounds extremely cliched when somebody says, I'm doing this for the future generations or for saving the future for ourselves. But it's true. Unfortunately, there's this huge gap between what science is saying and what we have internalized. But if we are able to communicate and build a strong narrative that actually shifts mindsets about accepting the challenge in front of us, then I think options that are today feeling like, unless the costs work out, I will not do it. Even if I have to give up 100 units, even if, that's probably the price of my one breakfast in some fancy place or whatever, that's too much. The things that we consider too much today might well be something that we are more than happy to do if we were only to actually accept science. But unfortunately, that itself seems to be quite a quite a leap that we need to make. But hopefully, I feel that that's thing, and I do think that the next version of this WRI conference ideally should have a whole new mixture of people sitting and listening to what's required. I mean, hopefully it's we are not speaking to only energy people, but we are actually speaking to a whole different audience of what that future looks like.
See, you were talking about a bottom-up approach. That would really work if people see that if I buy renewable power or if I buy an electric vehicle, I'm going to save some money. I mean, that's when the people down the line will take it. Otherwise, it doesn't make a difference to them whether they're getting their fan or AC is running out of coal power or out of renewable power. So to a large extent, this has to be forced top down also. Okay, the buildings have to be forced to have some solar panels. In various countries, we see that people have given priority parking for electric vehicles with plug-in kind of things. So a lot of it has been really top down. And in fact, when you go through various data, etc., I mean, you see even the Central Electricity Authority or the MNRE or even the Tangentco websites, you see the coal power, the daily generation data. If you see coal power, thermal, the diesel power, nuclear power, then it talks about non-conventional energy sources. These are no longer non-conventional. First of all, we have changed this word non-conventional. 15 years back, they were considered non-conventional. Today, this should be conventional and coal should be the non-conventional. I think that should be a first and foremost big change that we need to bring about. Saying that coal is no longer conventional. It is anti-conventional or non-conventional, as we should call it. So the bottom up will only come if the common man sees a big benefit in buying an electric vehicle or a renewable power. Otherwise, it has to be top down to start with.
Any other questions from the, Umesh from AVC.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask this question yesterday itself, but I missed this out. So my question is to the panelists, also to anyone here. You see, India is import dependent on solar cells, panels, and also for batteries. As if the current geopolitical situation is not enough, the macroeconomic condition of this world is also worsening, with Fed increasing its rate once in every 3 months. You know, Jeremy Powell is always on news. The cost of capital is also increasing. How are you still optimistic about the energy transition at this point of time? It's just a question to tease. It's not even a devil's advocate. I would like to know any of your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Martin, do you want to talk about this? To your own.
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid question. It's kind of why Germany has not switched off its last nuclear power because of the Ukraine-Russia war. So many things depends on, in a connected world, many things depend on a lot of geopolitical issues, the Chinese, how India looks at China. Many things are, currently, are challenges in our energy transition, definitely. But I hope that, as a not as a country, but I'm saying, but as a humanity, we'll have to find answers for all of these questions. It is not only on, you know, see, I think energy is a larger word. It's not electricity alone. Energy is converts a whole gamut of things that we do. So, as a humanity, we'll have to overcome or we'll find solutions to the crisis that we come across. I mean, I know the answer is very philosophical, but that's the only hope.
Yeah, actually, I would actually like to just amplify what Sundar is saying, because I think the answer to that question is actually philosophical, and it's not in a plan or a model or a energy pathway that we can draw out. The fact is that energy is about so many other things, and not just energy. This big shift that we're wanting to make is fundamentally a philosophical problem that in some ways we have to grapple with at some point in time. We are not going to find some technical answer to, while technology will keep changing and will keep enabling probably better sort of ways to address this. It's going to be, a political economy question and a philosophical question that will sort of show us what's going to happen.
Yeah, actually, overall, I am quite optimistic about shift to renewables and shift to non-fossil based fuels for providing energy. One is the coal prices itself is going up. So over a period of time, we will definitely see a shift towards renewables because it's more economical. Second is, if I run a petrol car versus an electric car in future, okay, I'll still observe my neighbor when he buys an electric car and see how it pans out, and then say, okay, that seems to be saving a lot of money. Then I'll shift to an electric car maybe at a later stage. So all this will come over a period of time. One is economics itself, not so much the love for renewable energy, because the common man doesn't understand all this. He only says, okay, I can save money by this. Definitely he will switch over to this. Thirdly, when the governments are looking at, let's say, 175 gigawatts by 2022 or 500 gigawatts by 2030 and so on and so forth, at least some of it will happen. I mean, we may not achieve those targets, but at least we'll get to about 120, 130 gigawatts by 2022 end, or even get to something like 300, 350 gigawatts by 2030. Something will happen. I mean, there will be teething problems, there will be grid backdowns, there will be a lot of issues with regarding to the geopolitics situation across the world. But at least we'll start moving towards that. I mean, awareness is there at the various levels, but people will look at what is panning out and what is suitable to them. And I'm quite positive, though, despite the problems that we face, we will start moving towards those. And lifestyle changes, not sure, because people still would like to, I mean, we used to go by bus or walk down to certain places. We are now got used to a car or a plane. We don't even use trains a lot more, I mean, like what we used to do. I mean, our first plane journeys were quite much later in life. Now, our train journeys are itself becoming quite rare. I mean, but I think if we shift to renewable powers and various other non-fossil based, I think we will start getting there towards net zero. The word net zero is too big a word, but I think we'll start at least targeting it, if not by 2050, 2070, or 2100, somewhere we'll get to it.
I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic. I'm realistic. You see, there are three circuit breakers which will trip. So the first one is already tripped, which is the rational mind. The rational mind has already realized we can't continue like this. The second circuit breaker, which is about to trip, is the emotional one. And the last one is survival instinct. So ultimately, we will probably come to survival instinct And that is why I am not optimistic, I'm not pessimistic, but realistic. Mankind wants to survive. And when a critical mass of mankind realizes that we can't survive the way we are doing it, and all the rational arguments, return on equity, inflation, deflation, they don't matter anymore. When we want to survive, we know how to survive.
Thank you, sir. So just one final question before we end this panel. Mr. Shankar Narayanan, could you answer this question?
So I think much more awareness has to be given. During the COVID-19, as Vinita ma'am was telling, there has been a lot of awareness given how to mitigate that, or this mask wearing has become a routine affair nowadays. Similarly, the insistent rains or heavy flooding or eccentric weather conditions ought to be appraised from the school children level, so that they are aware of the climate change. I think Mr. Sundarajan will take up in this to the government also about the awareness creation, because government is doing so many things. They are extending forest cover, this, that, and all, but it is not reaching the public. So that has to be made aware. So all this are being done only for the climate change, to mitigate the climate change. So this kind of extensive renewable energy penetration, everything is for mitigating the climate change. That kind of awareness has to be created.
By the government.
Yeah, I think it can be done through media and by the government. See, for example, if I take, as Madam Supriya Sagu Madam was telling, lot of initiatives have been done for green champions and green entrepreneurs. Lot of things have been included in their agenda, and they have been inaugurated by the CM also, but about which we are also not fully aware. So this has to be taken to the grassroots level. So then only, as our Tony sir was telling, we will be surviving. So like COVID, we had some measures for survival. So similarly, climate change is yet another COVID where we will have to survive out of it. So that is my point.
All right, thank you, sir. So that ends the panel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, so one request before we step out of the dais, a group photo for the panel, please. Thank you. Thank you so much, Priyanka, and all the panelists for this interactive session. And nevertheless, I would like to thank all the participants for their thoughtful questions and time. And I know I'm standing before you and lunch. And before we end, finally, I would like to invite Mr. Bharat Jairaj, Executive Director of WRA India, to deliver a vote of thanks for today.
So can I first ask that we show our appreciation once more to this panel? I thought it was really good panel. I know Mr. Venkatachalam was talking about the quality of solar panels, but this panel, of course, showed us what good quality panels were. I had 3 quick reflections actually on the panel, and I was sort of pointing to Priyanka that I wanted to say that, but in the interest of time, I thought I'll just merge it with these sort of concluding remarks. The first is, the comment on TEDA. I think it's a reality right across India. We are actually doing a study now of all the renewable energy agencies in different states. We are studying, I think, 10 to 14 of them. And what we find is let's remember these renewable energy agencies were set up at a different time for a different purpose. And while the world has moved on, the renewable energy agencies in most states have remained the same. So what they're really good at is, as Tuan was saying in the morning, about disbursing money and subsidies and so on. But really, these were kilowatt kind of projects, kilowatt kind of systems. And today, the world is in gigawatts. And suddenly, the renewable energy agencies across India are struggling to keep up. And utilities, of course, have taken charge. So this is, I think, something that even the MNRE is conscious of. And what comes out of this, we have to see, but that's sort of the first observation. The second is actually another thing that's been puzzling some of us is, we talk about rooftop solar a lot, but there's also another reality taking place in our cities. And that is that, rooftop solar is easiest to do when you own your roof. And ownership itself is a big issue today. We are seeing increasingly the urbanizing India is really a rental economy, a rental-based housing system. And it's also going vertical. What we are seeing is, so if it was nice, houses, independent houses where you owned your own roof, rooftop solar would be easier to do. But if you don't own your roof and you're staying in a shared, in a space where the roof is shared and so on, the financiers find it difficult to know how to finance this. So there is opportunity, of course, with the 8 rupee common expenses sort of, rooftop solar space. But otherwise, we really have to think about this, as we see this emerging India, which is really high-rise buildings with shared housing, shared, housing and shared roofs, which is rental-based. What is the model then for rooftop solar? And the sort of third observation, actually, I was going to ask Mr. Venkatachalam think about. You said, that it's unlikely that MSMEs and others will do this for the love of renewables. But yesterday we had Arun Roy, the MSME secretary, also talk about the funds he has with him for conducting energy audits. And so you get 1 lakh rupees to just do an audit, and then 10 lakh rupees to implement those recommendations of the audit. And many of the sort of, process efficiencies, rooftop, so on-site rooftop solar and so on can actually be captured in that. And he has 4 crore allocation last year, which he surrendered because the MSME sector didn't come and apply. So I think so one thing is actually going and asking about investing in something, but there is money available with government, which is also not being used. So just sort of 3 comments from this last session. But let me just use next few minutes to sort of conclude this sort of 1.5 days. I think we've had a great set of conversations on the sort of challenges and some opportunities. And as I said yesterday in the opening, these transitions are always messy. There is no playbook that we can just adopt and say, okay, this is what we have to do, and we just have to tinker with step C and step F. This is something we are going to have to figure out every day, learning, experiencing. We realize we made a mistake. We have to turn back, come around, try something else, and so on. And also we are talking about a sector, talking about a state, talking about a sort of time where there are multiple short-term issues every day that are always going to take priority over the medium long-term issues. And climate change continues to be kept in that space of medium to long term. So, how do I keep the lights on 24/7? That is the only question that a lot of the utility folks are thinking about. So we heard yesterday also, again, the MSME secretary talk about how the MSME sector is just coming out of COVID, went from COVID to inflation, inflation to recession. And at this stage, you're saying, what are you doing? Why are you not reacting to climate change? Why are you not investing? Says it's not easy for them. This is not what is on their mind. So we are always going to have to deal with these, thousands of short-term, immediate issues, fires burning that need to be put out. But at the same time, we have to keep pushing, as Sundar reminded us, keep pushing as researchers, as civil society, as folks interested in addressing climate change and development together. We have to keep the pressure up. So I was debating whether to say I'm optimistic, realistic, this stick, that stick, but I'll just say I still am quite positive about where we are today. Also because I'm beginning to see the conversation move out of the power sector. And for a long time, we've been talking only about how the electricity sector needs to move. I think now we are seeing more and more that it's become about how to shift the economy, because the whole state needs to move, the whole country needs to move, and that's, so this economy-wide transition, in which of course the power sector is an important player, but not the only one. And just in this over these last 1.5 days, we heard of many things, right? We heard again of the 20 gigawatts commitment of the government of Tamil Nadu. It was part of the manifesto of the DMK party. We saw the 2022 tariff revision, long overdue, and of course, therefore, became a tariff shock. But it's a multi-year tariff with some kind of visibility of what changes are likely to happen. We also have the commitment from the government of Tamil Nadu. We heard yesterday from the CFO of Tangetco, commitment from government of Tamil Nadu to bear the Tangetco's debt going forward, and that they've made budget allocations for this going forward. So at least this regulatory asset that Ron was talking about in the morning, this, sometimes we talked about it as a bucket with holes. At least one of those holes has been plugged, so that now things can start getting better. The focus on TNEB 2.0, which is, we didn't actually discuss this, but this is part of the agenda of the government to modernize the distribution grid and to really modernize TNEB over the next 6, 7, 8 years. Again, many of these, details are still being worked out, but I think the significant improvements we've seen in forecasting. 3 years ago, when we were talking about this, people would say, oh, but we don't know how to forecast. Forecasting is still off, right? Today, we don't talk about that. Our forecasting abilities on wind and solar have significantly improved. So at least we know with reasonable certainty how to include these resources. So several such, things I think give me at least that feeling of positivity. Are these adequate enough? Perhaps not. But let's also think of how this is all located within this larger context of the state's own commitments to climate change. This was not, again, 3 years ago when we talked about climate change, you used the word climate change, it was basically a group of 50 people in Delhi who talked about climate change, and mostly to each other. Today, that the state is talking about not just a department on climate change, but a set of missions focused on various parts of climate change around carbon capture and around climate missions is very encouraging. The GHG inventories, again, critical because you don't know, if you don't count it, you can't change it. And of course, the national policies which continue to move at a rapid, accelerated pace. Sometimes it worries me how fast the ambition is growing at the national level, because states are not moving at that pace. I mean, Tamil Nadu is at least keeping up in some cases, but some of the other states are nowhere. They're just where they were 5 years ago. But yet, I'm optimistic, and like I said, I agree with Sundar. We have an obligation, I think, to keep up the pressure. And I think yesterday in the afternoon, for those of you who missed it, we also had an excellent session where we heard about new and emerging technologies, because we have to again think beyond this solar PV and onshore wind. These are mature technologies. We have, I think, now there's enough in the market for this to sort of grow. But the conversations we had yesterday around storage, the different types of storage, different chemistries of it, just batteries, and not just limiting it to batteries, other types of storage, fuel cells, green hydrogen, then of course repowering, older wind plants, which of course Tamil Nadu will be in the forefront of. Offshore wind, of course, with the caveats around environment and social concerns, small wind turbines, so on and so forth. Mr. Kapoor yesterday also talked about the EV policy being revamped, revised, and that it's likely to come out soon. We already have in the TNERC order just a separate category of tariffs for EVs and so on. So I think, you know, all of these ideas sort of coming together, it's happening at one time. I think if, you know, when we think back of 5 years, 6 years ago when we used to sit and talk about Tamil Nadu, it was very, you know, it was very sort of siloed, one step, half a step, and so on. I think this, all of this coming together is really good. I want to actually do one more plug for something else that we are doing, and this sort of connects to the points that Tuan and then Sundar sort of kept bringing up, the issue of lifestyles, the issue of degrowth, consumption, and this is, you know, while of course many of these are voluntary and continue to be voluntary and should be encouraged, I'd also want to say that, you know, the government of India has now launched something called LIFE, which is Lifestyles for the Environment. The UN Secretary General was in India, I think last month, to officially launch LIFE. Now this focuses on actions that can be taken by individuals, by corporates, and also policies that can actually address degrowth, address at least the decoupling of growth and consumption and so on. And at this point, WRI is partnering with Niti Aayog to invite a call for ideas and papers. And the sort of what's called the best 5 papers will actually get funding from the government to then implement those ideas. What those ideas are, there's no limit to what those ideas are or how many you can submit, but I think there's an urgent need for us to think about what kinds of actions we want to take on. It's really about trying to reduce some of this high consumption. I'm constantly reminded, you know, how if we, you know, I remember some years ago, you know, we were trying to protect the beach front of Chennai, because at that time the idea was, you know, this, you know, if you looked from the sea, what you saw was, you know, this very flat thing, all, you know, old colonial type buildings, and the feeling at that time from the political leadership was this was not reflective of a progressive, developed, you know, state, and that we needed to have high-rise glass buildings, right? Because that's the image of the world, that the image that the world has given about what is development. I think that image of, you know, where these tall, large buildings, which at night are brightly lit up, even though no one is inside, that is the image everyone believes is a sign of development, of growth, of wealth. And we have to do something about this, right? And I think that's the point everyone's bringing up. So I'd really encourage us to, if from these conversations, if we can either individually, collectively come up with a bunch of ideas and then submit them. The place to submit it is the Niti Aayog website. You go to niti.gov.in/life. You'll get all the details, and they're accepting proposals, ideas till the 31st of December. So I'd really encourage all of us to explore what those might be. Like I said, it needn't be about energy alone. It can be around, you know, any of these: food consumption, transport, any of this. Okay, with that, let me just thank all of you for spending this time with us, day and a half. And also our virtual participants. I'm not sure how many of you are still there, but thank you. And of course, our speakers and moderators and my colleagues at CAG, at AVC, and at WRI. Thank you all for coming, and to the rest of you, I think we can now break for lunch.